Let me know when the recording has begun.
The recording has begun.
Okay. I have 5:31 p.m. Chair Schmidt, do you want to introduce the meeting or would you like me to?
I will ask if you could do that. Chair.
Okay. This is the Complaint Committee of the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force, City and County, San Francisco. We are in hearing room 408 at City Hall, Dr. Carlton B. Goodlett Place, San Francisco. This is a regular meeting of the Complaint Committee. I will now read remote access and in-person participation. The Sunshine Ordinance Task Force and its committees convene hybrid meetings that allow in-person attendance, in-person public comment, remote access for petitioners and respondents, and remote public comment via teleconference, that is via WebEx. The WebEx remote link login is tinyurl.com/4WNA9ZA7. The password is sunshine. The telephone call-in number is 415-655-0001. The meeting ID is 2599-995-7043 ##. To enter the speaker line, press *3. Meeting decorum. Any member of the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force may call for decorum due to the disorderly conduct of meeting participants. Excuse me. Persons who engage in threatening and or menacing behavior may be asked to leave. Shall we begin with item number 1?
Yes, let's do that. Thank you.
Item number 1, call to order, roll call, and agenda changes. Roll call. Member Sugarman. Not present. Member Stein.
Present.
Member Stein present. Chair Schmidt.
Present.
Chair Schmidt present. We have a quorum. Excuse me. Are the committee members aware of any agenda changes that we need to discuss?
I don't know of any myself.
Nor do I.
All right. All right.
Although we may abbreviate the last item just because our third member, I'd like to have Member Sugarman involved in the last item at some point. That's all.
All
We'll
right.
still go ahead and at least do some of it.
We ready for item 2?
Yes, please.
Item number 2, approval of the September 19, 2023 Complaint Committee meeting minutes. I have a copy of the minutes. Do we have any changes or adjustments?
I have a couple small changes, just small.
Sure.
6, 7, 8. Okay, so page 3, item 4, line 8.
Page 3. Item 4, okay. Line
8.
when Leanne Non speaks.
No, it's just the second paragraph, fourth line down.
Fourth line, request for which he believes is the reason.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it says Mr. Neha stated that all communication were exempt. I think just to be really clear, I think it should said Mr. Neha was told that all communication were exempt. Because I don't think he believes all communication was exempt.
Okay.
And then page 6, item 8.
Excuse me.
Is that page 6? Yeah. Page 6, item 8, line 9. And again, just to be clear, I think it should say the last line starts, the inspection directly affects the habitability of the residence. I think it should say something like directly affects the residents' understanding of the habitability of the building.
Excuse me for coughing.
So the inspection directly affects the residents' understanding of the habitability of the building. And those are my only changes.
And there was something else you said?
That was my only changes, those
Okay.
two changes.
Chair Schmidt, did you have any suggestions?
I had no suggestions. I will move to approve with the edits just recounted.
I'll second that.
Shall we move to public comment?
Yes, please.
Okay. If you'd like to make public comment, this is the time right now on item 1 regarding the action to approve the suggested amendments on the September 19 Complaint Committee meeting minutes. Ms. Cabrero, are there any people who want to speak? Stephanie, we can't hear you.
Apologies. Yes, there is one caller with their hand up, and for those that would like to speak to this item, please dial *3 to be added to the queue. And I have a muted caller, calling user number 2.
Is that Mr. Sullivan?
Yes.
All right, just a moment, sir, and I'll have the timer ready.
Okay.
Are you ready to begin speaking, sir?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. I think it is good the task force followed its procedures and allowed Mr. Wolf to submit his documents before a committee hearing and put them into the packet. I want to point out that the last time I appeared before a task force committee, I was denied the same procedure, even though I gave the SOTF plenty of time to put my documents into the packet before the hearing. The hearing continued. This was a different task force committee than the complaint committee. All laws and procedures should be applied equally, and no one should be disadvantaged. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Any other public commenters?
The caller has been muted. There are no other attendees with their hands raised.
All right, thank you. Let's vote.
Chair Schmidt.
Aye.
Chair Schmidt, aye. Member Stein.
Aye.
Member Stein, aye. Member Sugarman, absent. Shall we call item number 3?
Yes, please.
Item number 3, public comment. Members of the public may address the committee on matters that are within the committee's jurisdiction, but not on today's agenda.
May I comment?
Yes. Yeah, we have one in the room, and we also may have some online. Anyone here for public comment who's remote?
Yes, we do have one caller that is remote.
Okay, Okay, great. I'm going to start this time around with the gentleman in the room, and then we'll move to the remote person who has public comment.
Do I have 30 seconds or how long do I have?
Up to 3 minutes.
Oh, I don't need that long.
You ready?
I'm sorry, I'm ready to start.
Are you ready?
Yes, please.
Okay, good.
My name is Mark Bruno. I'm here on another matter. I'm a complainant in another matter. And over the almost 40 years I've lived in San Francisco, I've been before the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force perhaps 4 times at the most. I'm not an expert on the Sunshine Ordinance, but I have gone to police commission hearings. I was a commissioner. I was the chair of a commission called the Graffiti Advisory Board for 3 years, many years ago. So I know some of the challenges that face applying law, especially codified law, which is very statutory, very nuanced, and we don't normally read it unless we're unable to go to sleep at night because it's not something that we deal with regularly. So with those excuses or reasons aside, I find it disappointing in this very wealthy city that if I were to go to the police, which I've only had to do once when I myself was the victim of a crime, so I'm not there every week going to the police, asking them for records. I've only done it once. It was hell on earth. And it was nothing like the experience I've just had with DBI, which was also extremely unpleasant and we'll address later, but they're not alike. Since we have so much money in the city and we have a commission dedicated to this Sunshine Ordinance rather, and since we all believe that transparency and record keeping and record revelation to the public is a good thing, this should be made uniform. The one time I worked with Supervisor Peskin years ago on a park matter to get information from Rec and Park, it was a third way of doing business. Again, I'm not saying any one way was right or wrong, but it seems to me that if citizens, me as an example, who come here without being paid and are taking time away from their loved ones and the things perhaps more pleasurable in life. I'm not an attorney, so none of this is pleasurable to me, no offense, but it isn't. It's aggravating and exasperating and nerve-wracking, frankly. I don't like doing it. And I can't speak for everyone, but I know there are others in that situation. Well, the least we could do as a city is make the process to get records in every department more or less the same, and it's not. So again, Rec and Park, police, DBI, 3 experiences that I've had, vastly different in their approaches within the department to handing out records. Even the title of the officers who are responsible for it are not the same. That's confusing. So anything this group, this Ordinance Task Force can do, I realize you're the subcommittee, to remedy that would be much appreciated. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, we have a caller to give general public comment.
Yes, I am now.
When Cheryl's ready.
Ms. Cabrera, do we have a second caller, second speaker?
Yes, we do. And I'm unmuting the caller now. Caller, you've been unmuted.
Caller?
I don't need much time. I just want to say I apologize for giving my public comment on item number 2. And I guess I'm rusty. Thank you for your time.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you. And there are no other callers in the queue.
Okay. So general public comment is concluded, and we can move to number 4.
Item number 4, file number 23080, complaint filed by Mark Bruno against Patrick Hannon in the Department of Building Inspection for allegedly violating Administrative Code Section 6721 by failing to provide public records in a timely and or complete manner. On September 19, 2023, the complaint committee moved to find that the task force has jurisdiction, the records are public, and to continue the matter to the October complaint committee hearing. The committee requested the respondent to search for the photos and requested Ms. Gasparek to attempt to locate additional records.
Okay, we have already had a hearing on this, and we don't always do this, but we had the parties come back because in this case, it appeared there was a chance that some more photos could be located, and that would go a great distance to satisfying the request that was made. The first question I'm going to have is, who do we have here on behalf of the respondent? Is anyone here on behalf of the respondent? Okay, so at this point, it does not look like the DBI has anyone here or.
Pardon me, through the
Oh.
chair. Patrick
hello.
Henman is here. Please use the *3 feature to raise your hand so that I can unmute you if you are here for this item. Thank you. Patrick Hannon has been
Patrick
unmuted.
Hannon from the Department of Building Inspection. I'm here.
Oh, got it. Okay, great. So we do have a respondent here. There was a set of photos, and I'm going to start out not with a full presentation, but I'm going to ask each party if there was any progress with the photos. So I'm going to ask respondent first. What news do you have for us in terms of the photos that were discussed a month ago?
On September 25th, we provided the requested records, and we provided a link using Next Request. I'm happy to share a PDF of that email that we sent to Mr. Bruno, if that'd be helpful.
Okay, great. And Mr. Bruno, did you receive what you were looking for?
No,
Okay.
not at all. You were between, this hearing was between the original request on August 25th and a 1 month later response for an immediate disclosure request, not done properly within 48 hours, but done 1 month later. And just so we all know, this hearing came between my original request on August 25th, their so-called response on September 25th, and the extremely important hearing, important to other people, not just me, all the people who live in our building, all the tenants who have lived there, most of us seniors, for over 30 years on 27th of September. So it is part of this commission's, as I understand it, request and purview to look not only at the contents of what was given to Mr. Bruno, me, on the 25th, but when was it done in a timely manner? So I have two things to say, and I'll sum up here. It was certainly not done in a timely manner by Mr. Hannon's own admissions, by the documents he submitted, or the DBI, I should say, and Mr. Hannon submitted to this committee. It was not done in a timely manner, not remotely. Furthermore, it was done only 2 days before this very difficult, complex hearing before the Board of Appeals, which we won. But there's no way DBI could have known that beforehand. They made it extremely difficult for us. And lastly, regarding the contents, I would challenge anybody in this room, because you are experts on contents coming through record requests. How could any of you or any normal human being know that Mr. Hannon submitted or gave out on the 25th the full record, when on the 29th of August, 4 days late for the immediate disclosure request, he made the same statement to us in writing? We have done the homework we're required to do. I'm paraphrasing here. We have done the entire project. There's nothing else here. Go away. It's done. That was said, and I can read it to you just so we have it. I'm sure you've seen this. It's standard language. He said the same thing on the 25th of September. It says, I won't read the whole thing. It says, "Dear requester," this is on the 29th, his response to us, 4 days late. He then says, "We have finished conducting our search and found no other documents responsive to your request. Therefore, we consider your request closed. Those same words, that same boilerplate language, dismissively was used by the Department of Building Inspection on the 25th of September, again telling us, oh, we've done our job and it's all here. Who is a tenant in this city struggling as I am just to get by to pay rent would follow around the 5 inspectors, so there were 5 inspections that were done because of the problems in this building. This is not about making the building department look bad. It's about people who are being pushed out of their apartments because of a misuse of the law, an abuse of the law by the current owner. So it's very significant. Which one of us in the building, I'm 65 and I'm one of the youngest, would follow around those inspectors and know how many photographs they took? Did they take 0 photographs or 25? I don't know. So that's why trust is the essential issue in this matter, and it's been broken.
I understand that there is a claim of delay, and I know that was discussed a month ago here. But if we just sort of divide this up between the delay and the back and forth, et cetera, on one hand, in just the photos themselves, I will ask again, Mr. Bruno, do you believe that there are any photos that you were requesting that you did not receive by September 25th?
I'm a very down-to-earth, reasonable person without casting blame on any person, especially who I've never met, Mr. Hannon. But let me just read you one email to this committee from him. I don't know the answer to that. Nobody can possibly know.
No. Just what you know. Just what you know.
I do not know.
Okay, but when you were here earlier, you said that there was a certain number of photos that you believe you had not received, and then you were hoping that they be produced.
And some were, and some were not.
Some were. So you think there's still some outstanding?
I don't know what. Again, may I just read this one quote from Mr. Hannon, because I think it will clarify everything.
I need you to.
So I don't know the answer to that.
Okay. So you did. How many photos did you receive with the September 25th email that you had not gotten before?
I don't know exactly the number because I was concentrating, being a non-attorney with 5 commission members there at the Board of Appeals and the rest of my work and the rest of my life to prepare for a Board of Appeals, 2 appeals, to a Board of Appeals 2 days later. So by them sending it to me just 2 days prior to the Board of Appeals hearing, they made it impossible for me to look at it. And if you think I've spent the rest of my life counting up the photographs from Mr. Hannon, again, when I have a chance, I would like to just read you the one sentence from Mr. Hannon, which will clarify this.
I'm going to stop you because my questions are very specific. I'm going to ask Mr. Hannon a question, which is the September 25th email. Do you believe that any remaining photos that were responsive to the request, as the request had been stated, that all remaining photos were supplied with that September 25th email that you sent?
I do.
Okay. Do you remember approximately the number of photos that were included with that email, September 25?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I was just counting them up, and forgive me, I stopped counting to answer your question, but it's between 30 and 40. So it's and we got them from 4 different inspectors, including 2 sets from 1 inspector.
Okay. And so it's your understanding that you got all the photos that are relevant to the request, and all of those photos have been forwarded to Mr. Bruno, correct?
That is our belief. Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. I'm going to just put a question to my committee. Since we've already heard the matter, we know that there is a claim of delay here. We haven't ruled out anything with regards to this case. We do know about everything that happened in the case, but I think one thing that we were able to do, which we don't always get, which is that we got those photos, and actually, even though it would have been nice to get the photos even earlier, fortunately, they were received to be of some assistance. I'm not saying that that excuses any other delay, but I'm going to just ask a question of Member Stein, which is, what do you think we should do here, since we sort of have the answer that had been to the question that had been sort of brought us here from the last month until this hearing? Any thoughts on what you would like to do, including questions for the witnesses?
Yeah, I mean, I did have one question for the respondent, Mr. Hannon. So did you reach out to each inspector who looked at the building?
Yeah, let me state, I was actually on medical leave during this time.
Did somebody from DBI reach out to each inspector at the?
Yeah, so we
And
have
was
somebody.
there only a total of 4 inspectors?
Let me state, I work with someone who does the administration of the sunshine request under my supervision. So of course I'm the responsible party, just to be super clear. But I was not the person that directly reached out, and I was not in the office that day. My understanding, and let me open up the original request from Mr. Bruno. There were 5 inspectors that he requested them from, and we got them from 4 of them. I don't believe, hold
There were
on.
only 4 inspectors, 5 instances, but 4 inspectors.
Oh, you're right. 5 instances and 4 inspectors.
Thank you,
Hold on one
Mr.
second.
Bruno.
Let me see. And we did. We got photos from all 5 instances from all 4 inspectors. Yeah.
Okay.
And so we did reach out to them directly, and they were able to provide these photos. And I don't know why they didn't provide them originally.
Okay. Well, I'm glad to hear that all of the photos were, it seems like all of the photos were probably obtained, but I still am concerned about the fact that this was an IDR. It wasn't produced in a timely fashion, so it would still be my preference, I think, to maybe forward it to the consent committee and say this is a violation of 67.25, the rules for immediate disclosure requests, even though at the same time I'm happy that the photos were eventually given with a little bit of leeway that they potentially could have been used, even though I recognize that it's tough to sort through that in 2 days.
I'm sorry, I didn't.
Even though I realize it's tough to sort through that in 2 days, I'm glad that DBI did the work they should have done immediately and got those photos.
Well, I think that I will second the motion, and that basically just to not to change the motion or anything, but just to give an explanation. We can't make any final decisions in this committee. We can, however, submit the matter to a hearing before the full task force, where the full task force would actually decide whether there were violations here and what those violations may be. This committee doesn't have the ability to make a final decision. What we were able to do, one, is to get the photos, and 2, we, according to this motion, which has been seconded, we're placing this onto a special consent calendar whereby I believe the parties won't even need to appear, and if none of the members object, then there will be a finding of a violation.
You're
in
missing
terms of-
part of the record. May I just, sorry to interrupt, but it's just from the Board of Appeals. And what the Board of Appeals said, the only attorney there, it makes me uncomfortable. This is about the matter that I appeared, that we hear this from you, Mr. Green, the liaison, official liaison to the Board of Appeals, Michael Green, with somewhat regularity, that there's places in the process where a mistake should have been caught, but it wasn't. And when I hear that something should have been caught 3 or 4 times but wasn't caught, what that implies to me, he preceded all this by saying how uncomfortable this makes him to speak about it. What that implies to me is that it was not caught intentionally. It's not me speaking, it's the Board of Appeals. And that's very, very troublesome. And I want to ask you if you can address why, what happened in this process, meaning where I live at 15 Nobles, why this wasn't caught at any of the 3 or 4 steps. And it was only fixed because Mr. Bruno filed an appeal here. And I want to know, if Mr. Bruno had not filed this appeal, how would it have just moved forward anyway? Most likely it would have. I can't imagine any other way this mistake would have been caught. So I'm placing the significance of the failure by Mr. Hannon, innocent or not, failure to not give us the record in a timely manner in a great context, because this is the 3rd time over 4 years we've had to go to the Board of Appeals over this matter. And it's not fair that the DBI, with all of its money, they built the most expensive office building in the history of the city, $238 million. They have the resources to give us the record on time.
I think we get it. We have pretty much done what we can do here today. All right. And we are making a recommendation, putting it on a consent calendar. If we have a seconded motion, we will still have public comment on this, but we can't get into matters that.
But you should know, now you know.
Other
That's all.
parts of the city.
I understand.
We understand the context here.
Okay, thank you.
It's understood. Yeah.
Thank
we
you.
Understood.
Commissioners, can I just make one quick point before you second the motion?
I'll give Mr. Hannon actually, Member Stein first, and then Mr. Hannon. Member Stein.
No, I just want to mention that the fact that we want to send it to a consent calendar means that we very strongly believe that it didn't, that it was a violation of of the immediate disclosure request. If we didn't think it strongly, we would just send it to the regular task force for them to rehash it. But we're coming out with a strong position that we think there's a violation here.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Hannon, you're up. Your turn.
Yeah, I just want to note that since January 1st, our department has fulfilled 544 sunshine requests.
Wow.
I think that we are not regular appearers before this committee. We take this responsibility seriously. We do our best to provide the documentation. Obviously, we did not provide Mr. Bruno in this case with all the documents that he requested. As soon as we were made alert and were able to rectify that, we did. And so I just want to note that there's no misintent here, that just like we do with every request that comes in, we take the responsibility seriously and we do our best to fulfill it.
Thank you, Mr. Hannon. And yes, you're not on our 10 most wanted list. Those are other agencies, not the DBI, but that's just my personal comment. I'm not ruling on anything when I say that, but yeah, the DBI is, we do see the DBI occasionally, but not in any extraordinary amount. Okay.
Yeah, I think this is the second time this year that we have been before this committee. And in both cases, we provided the documents that were requested. So again, 544 is not a small amount. We take the responsibility seriously and just wanted to make that point.
Okay, great. Yeah. Member Stein, should we call for public comment on this? Okay.
I want to make sure I got the motion right. It's just to forward the matter to the consent calendar, the SOTF.
Well, just to be full, I'll just say these are public records under our jurisdiction, and we would like to forward this case to the consent calendar with recommendation that we find a violation of 67.25, dealing with, the untimely provision of an immediate disclosure request. Or for the late provision of an immediate
So
disclosure
just one
request.
question. It's not clear, but you'll make it clear maybe, whether or not both parties will be obligated to or the right to submit documents or something. We're not sure about that. I don't care about appearing, but I want to just make sure they have the documents that are, because it's just a huge flow of documents and it's confusing.
You've got to talk about it.
Oh, sorry. Okay. So I apologize. So to Mr. Hannon, he might be interested in knowing this as well, DBI. But if you look at the original package here from the 19th of August, I believe it was, I'm sorry, the 19th of September, that we originally met here on this matter, it's repetitive and it goes, and it's nobody's fault, but it's huge. So I think it would be useful, and I would send it to Mr. Hannon at the same time, if I could take out just the four, so it's his two responses to us, including the one where he says everything is there. So it's just his email, so he could correct them. And it's my original request. And it's just a packet, very small edited version of this. Nothing's edited within it, but it's for them to see what's going on, because otherwise you can't see it.
They do see a copy of the entire packet.
It's
when it
confusing.
comes to the
Okay.
consent yeah.
It's very confusing, I'm telling you. It's like I had trouble. I went through it again today. That's how I know. Because there's a lot where one party is copying everything the other side did, and it's
No,
I think
I believe you, and
Yeah.
this has been an ongoing issue with our packets. But I think even though it's not efficient for us, task force members have learned to, how to kind of read them, even when they might seem confusing. But
or
if there's a provision for, I believe you can still, Cheryl can correct me, but I believe you can still add materials to the packet up until 5 days before it's heard by the full SOTF. But in terms of editing the packet,
no, not editing it. No, what you said is fine. I'm
Okay.
happy to just give a one page rather than anything that's already there. I could just write, and maybe Mr. Hannon would like to do the same, or somebody for the department, a one page summary of my argument. That's
I
all.
think that'd be extremely useful,
Yeah.
and to put that up
Yeah.
front with with your petition,
Yeah.
your overall argument, I think that'd be
Yeah, and it'll just refer to documents that are already there.
Yeah.
That's all. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Ready for public comment? Ms. Cabrera, do we have public commenters available?
As a reminder, for those that would like to make public comment to this item, please dial *3 to be added to the queue. And Ms. Leger, there are currently 0 attendees with their hands up.
Thank you.
Let's vote.
Apologies, last
We have
minute.
one.
Yes.
Okay, public comment.
Caller 292, you are unmuted.
Good afternoon. This is Patrick.
May I get your name, please, sir?
Callers, can you please
Sir,
repeat your name?
Ms.
This is Patrick Manetshaw. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Patrick. One moment and you can begin speaking.
They just lowered my hand.
Are you ready? Ms. Cabrera, is he ready to begin speaking?
Yes, he is unmuted, and I'm lowering the hand to identify those that I've already unmuted.
Patrick, you can begin speaking whenever you're ready.
Thank you. I am sorry. You
caller is still
muted me again. Hello?
Patrick, you can begin speaking whenever you're ready.
I am ready, but I keep getting muted.
The caller has
So-
already unmuted.
So I'm sorry I'm calling in late. What agenda item number are you on and what is the title of the item?
It's item number 4, file number 23080, complaint filed by Mark Bruno against Patrick Hannon and the Department of Building Inspection.
Can you tell me the item number for the Bruce Wolf complaint?
There's 2 of them. Item number 5, file number 22115 and 22116.
All right, I will mute myself, but please let's not go through this again when you get to item 5.
All right, thank you, sir.
There are no other speakers in the queue.
Are they all speakers for this, for item number 4?
No, she said there are no other speakers. She said no other speakers. There's 6
Correct.
people.
I'm seeing on the screen that there are 6 people ready to speak. Is this correct, Ms. Cabrera?
There are 6 listeners with 0 in the queue to speak.
All right, great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I'll do the vote. Member Stein?
Aye.
Member Stein, aye. Member Schmidt?
Aye.
Member Schmidt, aye. Member Sugarman, absent. Shall I repeat?
Thank you for coming.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for your.
All right, let's move to the next item.
Item number 5, file number 22115, complaint filed by Mark Sullivan against Bruce Wolf for allegedly violating Administrative Code Section 6721E by failing to provide access to requested records, 6725, by failing to respond to an immediate disclosure request in a complete and timely manner, California Public Records Act, 6253D as in dog, for willful delay and obstruction to access of a public record.
All right, and let's see who we have here today. Mr. Sullivan, are you still on the line?
Okay,
Okay, Sullivan is here. And the respondent, Mr. Wolf, Member Wolf, Chair Wolf, are you present?
I am present, and I have a question about process.
Process question. Go ahead.
On or around September 25th, I made a request for these 2 complaint files to be combined. Did you receive notice or were made aware of this before posting of the agenda? The letter about that is in, for this complaint, on page PDF page 60.
About a continuance.
No, the last paragraph, and the subject line includes a request about combining the files.
Yeah, I see that the letter says, it talks about continuance and combining, yes. Yeah. At this point, they're not combined. I don't know if that's something we are going to want to do. I guess I could ask if Mr. Sullivan, who's the complaining party, would object to the request that you made to combine. Mr. Sullivan, did you do you accept?
I object
You object. Okay.
because I think they're 2 separate issues.
Okay. All right. So we have a request, but it's not, it's opposed to combine. I would be inclined to leave the two, although obviously they should be heard anywhere along the way in tandem, at least. But I'm inclined to not combine them myself right now. Member Stein, what do you think about that, the request to combine?
I'm also, maybe because I read them separately, but I'm a little bit wary of combining them because I think that they do kind of address two separate issues and possibly would even be, two separate motions or multiple motions. So I think it's okay how it is.
Okay, let's go ahead and hear them separately here today. I don't want to make I think if the request to combine, we're not going to grant the request today. But I don't want to rule out that maybe somewhere along the way that request might be granted by someone else. It may be that at the task force they may grant a motion to combine, but for now we're not going to combine them, and so we're just going to start with 2215. And so let me first, because the last case was somewhat abbreviated, we didn't quite do a standard 3-minute hearing type of scenario, but that's what we're going to do here. And for each of the remaining complaints that we have here today. So first we will hear from the petitioner for up to 3 minutes, and then we'll hear from the respondent for up to 3 minutes. We have had our chance to look at all the documents, so you don't necessarily need to repeat what's in the documents. And after the 3 and the 3, the members may have questions for either petitioner or respondent. After that question period, members will deliberate and decide questions such as, does the task force have jurisdiction of the matter? Does it involve public documents, public meetings, etc.? We may or may not make a recommendation, and we will, in some cases, but not all, forward the matter for a full task force hearing, since at this time we have no power to make any type of final decision in this committee. All right, so when Ms. Leger is ready, we will hear first from the petitioner.
Mr. Solomon, are you ready to begin?
Yes.
Go ahead, sir.
And Mr. Wolf's email questioning me as local media, he stated our office keeps a pretty solid service list. This is an easily identifiable record. On January 28, 2022, I sent an IDR to the task force for the solid list of local media, and they kept. And any requirement or procedures to be included on that list and the date and time of the January 25th, 2022 retreat agenda was posted because I knew that was answerable. I got no response. I was ignored. I resent the IDR on February 7th, 2022. This is an IDR that was purely administrative request in nature, of which Mr. Leger knew the answer and that there was no such list, no procedure. She could have answered on her own request, and this thing would be over. Instead, I guess Mr. Chair Wolf somehow thought this was important enough for him to be involved. He instructed the task force administrator to respond to my request was voluminous, even though Mr. Fleischer had at least twice informed him that there were no records. A list and how to get on this list is not a voluminous request. To use voluminous number of records in the response, you must first have searched the records and find many records before you respond with voluminous nature. Sunshine Ordinance Section 6725B and CPRA 7922535C, unusual circumstance, is the use of it. 2, the need to search for, collect, and appropriately examine a voluminous amount of separate and distinct records that are demanded in a single request. In this request, there are only 2 possible distinct records. Furthermore, if there is no requirement to do a search for a response to find out if there are any records, then there's little point to the IDR when a custodian record can respond with voluminous at will. Essentially, all IDRs can be turned into a regular public record request by government officials without any evidence of many records. The only purpose, and I don't know why, Mr. Wolf's claim of voluminous was to delay and obstruct a public record request. On March 1st, 2022, Ms. Fleischer replied, the Office of Sunshine Task Force did not keep a list of local media for special meeting notice purposes. It took 32 days from my first IDR, 22 days from my second IDR for SOF to respond to say there was no record. This even breaks the laws on a regular public record request. There is a pattern of the task force to ignore me.
Mr. Sullivan, your time is up.
Yeah, if you could wrap.
Thank you for your time.
Okay. All right.
No,
Thank you,
for your
Mr.
time.
All right. When Harold's ready, we will hear from the respondent.
Mr. Wolf, are you ready to begin speaking?
I am.
Go ahead, sir.
First, members, I didn't submit any additional records for which my needs are now contained in the file. I felt duplication, repetition of existing records in the file may be just burdensome to the process, to the file, and wasteful printing of hard copies. So if needed, I'll refer to them directly somewhere else between the petitioner's side and my side. The petitioner complainant alleges that I somehow disrupted the process of a request. I was made aware of the request by the requester as they added me to a subsequent message that an IDR from them was being resent to the SOTF administration office requesting this information. But this IDR was not a request to me directly in or by name. Thus, any delay would be on the part and parcel of the true respondent. This complaint is directed to an incorrect party, namely me, as I was not being requested the information nor custodian of the record. Despite not being party to the request, I did in fact try to assist them to an office that may be able to help them, but not to deter or delay disclosure of the records, as is my duty under the Sunshine Ordinance. Subsequently, that is essentially what they did. And thus again, the request was made to our administration's office and not to myself. I never mentioned nor suggested that the record was voluminous. I never used that word. What I suggested was that to request an extension or an extension to be invoked, so to give our office some time to either create or format or redact or anything else that may be required for the disclosure, because the IDR was already somewhat late. And I wanted to make sure that there was time for that. But I didn't suggest that it was voluminous at all. Not at all. Just that's what the code says. So it was not my suggestion. Discussion between myself and the SOTF office and or our SOTF co-chair at the time was purely administrative in order to help fulfill the request, not delay it. Any other actions to communicate with the requester on the findings thereafter were made at the decision of the SOTF administrator or the office. Again, I was not the named requester of this IDR. I had no custody or actual knowledge of the existence of the records to be requested. I contend that there's no correlation in connection with the Sunshine Ordinance as to my actions, and there was no wrongdoing or non-compliance on my part as the SOTF chair at the time with regards to this complaint, and respectfully request that this complaint be recommended to be dismissed. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Okay, now we may have questions. I'll defer at the moment to Member Stein. Any questions for either of the parties?
I'm going through my notes here. So I guess I have a couple of questions for respondent. Can you just, maybe you feel like you addressed this, but I'm wondering if you can speak again to why you became involved in this process when you are not a custodian. Why not just ask Cheryl to respond as per an IDR, search for the documents and respond to the requester? Or why not respond to the requester when you're CC'd that you are not the custodian and it'll be handled by Cheryl directly?
Well, that's why I assisted them and directed them to the office, first of all. Second of all, I've been on the task force for over 15 years. And in past years, we've sent in print copy many iterations, many copies of the agenda to people who have requested them, including the media. And I suppose, in my recollection, that was still happening. And so that was why I had suggested that the office provide that information. And then I found out subsequently later to that that this file doesn't exist. So so I stand corrected, but it was just based upon my recollection because I've been on the task force for a long time, and that used to be our practice. So I imagined that it was still continuing, and just also, frankly, the ordinance has a clause in it, provision for the media to be notified, when there are special meetings and various other things. So I kind of, it was just a bit something sensical to me.
It's somewhere in there.
Oh,
Can I correct a few things?
one second.
right.
I think I want to see if there's anything that Ms. Leger would like to add in, since she's been mentioned here.
To Mr. Wolf and to Mr. Sullivan, when I first asked about this particular item, I was directed to say that we don't have a media list, and that when somebody wants information about a special meeting or whatever would be on an agenda item, that direct them to the task force website.
Can I ask you a question? Who directed you to do that?
Mr. Young.
Okay. That was a question I had for the next case. So.
Yeah.
Okay, there was, I'm going to give Mr. Sullivan an opportunity for a brief response to those factual items. So go ahead, Mr. Sullivan. It sounds like you may have something to respond with.
Yes. First of all, on the first immediate disclosure on exhibit number 3, which is page 29 of this packet. It goes
Can you
to
wait one
the
second?
Sunshine Ordinance.
One moment.
Sorry,
Hold
just
on.
wait 1 second for us to get to the same page you're on.
Yeah, we're
All
just
right.
finding the page.
Page 29, you said?
29, 71, item number 5.
Okay, okay, that's fine.
Says big exit 3. Okay, so that's my first public immediate IDR, and that's to the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force. When I didn't get a response, I did 2, again, Exhibit 4, which is the next page down. I did it to the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force, and I put in Mr. Wolf and Mr. Yankee in there because I didn't get a response. And they're the head of the task force, you know, they hold position. But it was clearly also to the task force in general. It's just a repeat. Mr. Wolf says that he sent me an email or something, communicated to me somewhere that I should be directed to the task force thing. But there is no, I never got an email there. He never directed me anywhere. The other thing is the conversation happened between, was given to me by Mr. Yankee, and I was not part of this conversation where he said that he told Ms. Leger to respond as voluminous, which she did. She followed his thing, even though she knew that there were no records and that she was told, like she just said, she was told by Mr. Young that there was no records, and that's what she should have said. But she was following Mr. Wolf's request, even though, and she tried to tell him twice.
Thank you,
And then it
Mr.
took
Sullivan.
Forever. Okay.
Can I ask Mr. Sullivan, so in the second time that you send the request, which has now got you know, 2-line of SOTF, Bruce Wolf, and Matt Yankee, were you thinking that this request, the second request, was a request that you were directly making of all 3 parties?
I was thinking that someone needed to respond, and that so my first line on the top of it, so I am rescinding this immediate record request, and I'm noting Carl Olson on this, and because I'd already sent it once, and I have the date the next time, you know, where I sent, it's just the same record, Friday, January 28th. And I sent it to the chair and the vice chair because I wanted to put pressure on getting this request done.
Okay, so it's really to the SOTF, and you were just, it's kind of a CC to these other, the chair and the vice chair, so they're aware that this request has not been answered.
Right. Well, it's CC'd, or they're in charge of the task force. So, you know.
Mr. Chair.
You know, and they're supposed to make sure that the Sunshine Ordinance is followed.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I'll now give Member Wolf an opportunity to respond to any factual contentions that we've just heard.
Yeah, I just want to say, I think some of the chronology, this is all kind of in a state of flux. The communications that Ms. Leger was receiving from Mr. Young and the communications she was receiving from me, it was all kind of happening at the same time. I was not aware that Mr. Young had responded that there was no responsive records at the time. So they could have, you know, more or less ignored what I had said, but I'm not sure what was going on in the process at that time. So I'm kind of unaware of what was happening in those moments. And yes, the document, I think it's Exhibit 4 that he said that he's just rescinding the IDR, and the IDR, to reiterate, was not to either myself or to Vice Chair Yankee, but to the SOTF office. So I don't feel like there was any delay in this at all. I don't sense that there's really any any kind of issue. It's a lot of it was just happening in the moments of process. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And yes, I agree myself that the fact that there were several conversations going on, but your involvement as the chair, Chair Wolf, was you were communicating with Ms. Leger, but the fact that there was a different set of conversations about the content of the response here, I think that's significant. Yes, absolutely significant. Okay. Any other questions, Member Stein?
Can I ask like question to Cheryl?
Yes.
So Cheryl, if this IDR came in, and what was your, because there were multiple processes going on at once, what was your understanding of what you needed to do, and where did that understanding come from?
It's an IDR, so I immediately spoke with Victor about the best way to handle it because I had never had a request involving local media or news media. This is new to me. And I went, as soon as I could, I went to him to say, where is this list? Because I've never seen it. He said, we don't have one. And I said, well, Bruce is saying that we do. Victor said, whenever anybody has needed information from an agenda, we direct them to the website.
Okay.
Miss-
Did you search for the list, or you just asked Victor, like, where's the
I
list?
asked Victor since he's been doing it so long.
That was like your search, was to
That
ask
was-
Victor. Okay.
I wouldn't know where to, I don't have a directory in, I'm sorry. I don't have a directory in my records that specifically addresses media or local media or newspapers, anything like that. So there was no information for me to go to.
May I follow up with Member Stein's question to Ms. Leger? Mr. Chair.
It's up to you.
So
Go ahead.
So I just wanted to note that when I had responded to Ms. Leger, it was on February 7th at 3:37 p.m. I did not know that she had spoken to Mr. Young at that time, and did not find out until the following day at around 12, a little after 12 noon. So, like I said, it's all kind of in a state of flux there. And had I known that Mr. Young had responded to that earlier, the previous day, then I would have said, okay, disregard what I was inquiring about.
All right. So just to be clear, Cheryl, so you talked to Victor. Victor said there was no list, but you didn't get back to the petitioner right away to say there was no list because Bruce was saying, Mr. Wolf was saying that there was a list somewhere. And so you weren't sure.
Right.
Okay.
There have been responses, so.
Okay.
No more questions from me. Member Stein? You certainly can keep asking if anything.
No, I don't have any more
but
questions.
oh, sure. So at this point, I think we can figure out the limited answers to what we can do here today, which it basically includes, do we send this on to the task force because it involves public records, and do we have jurisdiction? I think those two preliminary facts are not a problem here. I don't know if we want to go so far as to make a recommendation. I get a sense that my hunch here, it may not just be my hunch, is that if this was a complaint that was lodged against a task force, that's one thing. But this is a complaint that's lodged against Member Wolf. And I think that whatever the task force's actions, responses were in addressing this IDR, that would be on the task force itself. But I'm not sure if I see a basis for finding that somehow there's a separate obligation that Chair Wolf had that would make this claim against him viable. That's my sort of preliminary thought on this. I also will just say that I don't know if I've heard anyone actually say, oh, this was complex, so it wouldn't qualify as an IDR. I think somehow everyone's in agreement that it probably could have been, it was not something that was improper to be handled as an IDR. And yet I don't know if that even is going to matter here. So those are my thoughts.
Can I point out one thing?
Hold on, Mr. Sullivan. We're deliberating. Member Stein.
Okay.
I actually find this a bit of a tough one because I do think there was an IDR request that wasn't handled, as an IDR request should be handled. I think, he should have been gotten back to in one day, told we don't have any such records, but we're inquiring further. We'd like a little extra time to see if we can locate that record. But that didn't exactly happen. I understand that Chair Wolf, Chair at the time, Wolf, was just really CC'd on this, but I feel like he also, to some degree, implicated himself in the process, made the process more confusing, and it didn't get processed in the way an IDR should be processed. So I feel like there is probably a violation of 67.25 in terms of, not being gotten back to in one day. But it's not clear to me that the correct, person to be named as the violator is Mr. Wolf. So it just, I think there is probably an SOTF violation here. And I think there was just too many hands in the process, and somehow it didn't get processed correctly as an IDR.
Yeah. And the other thing, and this is just something where I'm not 100% clear on, is would the task force even have jurisdiction because this is a complaint against a member? Isn't we had these decisions that were made about complaints against the task force, complaints against individual members, and I'm just trying to think back to what was finally decided there. Do you recall?
Gosh, I assume because it came before us that they didn't decide that it couldn't. But I know there was some discussion about, leaving it to ethics to handle potential complaints against the task force as a whole.
Yeah. I'll ask Member Wolf, since Member Wolf is a longstanding member of the task force. Member Wolf, is this something that we may not even be really in the correct in finding that the task force has jurisdiction because it's a complaint that the rules as currently set and forth would not allow that to go to the task force?
So I think it was maybe August or July. I think it was over the summer sometime. We had an item specifically on this question. And we had approved to allow the task force to hear complaints against task force members. There was no like specific necessarily context to it, but that the process would allow us to adjudicate our own. And in my experience in the past, when the task force itself was brought up on a complaint, we took it up as purely a administrative issue, and not hear it as a complaint against us, but left it open to whatever other venues or that was available to a petitioner. But most of the time it was, we slap ourselves on the wrist and say, we'll fix it. And make the correction. So I don't have that that resolution in front of me, but I believe we did take it up.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Member Stein.
Can we, I just don't know if it's proper to forward something where the request was to the task force and then the complaint is brought against an individual who was not the object of the request.
Yeah, that's what I was also going to say.
Because what is the, Member Stein, are you saying that there is issue with jurisdiction?
It seems like there's just an issue with process. I don't know if it's jurisdiction, but normally when we have complaints, a request is made to a certain body. That body doesn't answer the request.
Mm-hmm.
And then the complaint is brought against that body. It can't be brought against other bodies or, other people in that body that weren't the object of that request.
Yeah, got it. I'm going to give Mr. Sullivan just a brief opportunity to, it sounds like he's got something to say.
Yeah, I have a few things to say. So first of all, the first thing I did do was bring this to the Ethics Commission. So, because your procedures don't allow anyone to hear a complaint, it's only a complaint against a person on the tax forms. You can't hear a complaint against each other. That's a whole nother issue, which we can deal with later. But I brought this to the Ethics Commission. They won't hear this. They won't hear complaints on the public records on the Sunshine Ordinance unless it's specific officers, elected officers in certain commissions. That's it. And they have to be willful. Other than that, they're not interested in hearing any complaints about the Sunshine. Now, I think they're reading 6735D wrong.
Okay.
But,
yes.
So
got it.
So then the only other option I have is the person who's in charge of the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force is the chair.
Mm-hmm.
And he's the only person that I can file a complaint with.
And I understand, Mr. Sullivan, that you're basically just trying to figure out what are your options here, and you tried every possible way to do it, and it makes total sense. Yeah, I get it, and it's certainly not inconceivable that ethics would have that response. Yes. Okay. Well, I'm going to go back to deliberation here. I think that the only thing that we can really decide here is, are we going to send it forward or are we going to not send it forward? And the question that you just raised is, can we even send it forward, since maybe it can't go forward because it's not against the actual records custodian? That's a possibility. Although then it just would kind of sit in limbo because we can't dismiss a case. The other possibility is we just basically say, okay, well, let's just send it to the task force and let them figure it out. So that seems like only real possibilities in terms of what we do here today. And I could see going either way on that. Member Stein, do you have some thought about something very specific that we can look at, which would tell us you can't even forward this to the task force and have them hear it?
Hang on one second. I don't have something specific in mind, but I kind of want to go back and look at the language of 6721 or 6725. I mean, I think it's more in the shadow and penumbra of the thing that the complaint is normally brought against the custodian of the record, which and the person to whom it's submitted, and here it's not really Chair Wolf, but I don't know that there's anything specific in the actual sunshine ordinance. So I'm going to look for a minute. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
I'm inclined. I think that's a question that may be determinative here, but I think that ultimately one way of looking at the task force is to say, well, this was a request to the task force itself, and so we can't grant relief against Member Wolf in this situation. And that would be, possibly an option that I would propose once we get to the task force. And so that would mean we dispose of it at that time, but it would be the task force doing it. And I'm inclined to sort of accept that as a reasonable way of going forward, because it is a little bit unclear. So I'm thinking that we do have jurisdiction. I'm just going to make the motion. I think the task force should look at this. I think these would be public documents. I think that arguably the task force would have jurisdiction here, but I want to leave a possible out on that. It may be that arguably there's no jurisdiction to begin with, but I think the task force ultimately would need to make that determination. And I don't think that we should make a recommendation, partly because the members present are not quite in agreement on every single item. So that's my recommendation, as we send it to the task force.
Okay. I'm a little bit on the fence because part of me feels like really it's properly, if it is a complaint against the task force, it's properly probably a complaint against the administrator who had potentially had access, knew that we didn't have the records, could have said in one day that we don't have the records, but I'm still looking. But then member Wolf got implicated, sort of got involved in it. But it almost seems like it's just not it's not a correctly framed complaint. So that would be an argument for dismissing it, perhaps letting it be refiled with the, with the being directed at the original recipient, and there was an earlier version sent as well, but there was no response. So I think there's a 6725 violation. I just think it's not really properly aimed at Chair Wolf. So that for me would be an argument and the alternative would be dismiss it and let it be refiled with the, framed in a different way. So I'm on the fence too, but I just bring this up as another way to look at it. But I could go either way.
Are you modifying the motion, Laura?
No, I'm discussing. Am I allowed to discuss?
Yeah.
Mr. Chair.
Hold on one moment, Member Wolf. The only problem with that is that we couldn't dismiss anything, I don't think. That's the problem. So I'll just put that out there.
Well, we could recommend
dismissal.
Dismissal because of improper naming of the violator, or
Yeah.
I'm not sure how you put it.
Yeah, okay. Member Wolf, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to make the same suggestion. We have had many cases where complaints were brought against the wrong person that the request was originally made for, that similar to this kind of case. So I just wanted to state that because I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. All right. I think that what we need to do is figure out a way to decide the least amount possible here today. That's, I guess, my thought. We could make a recommendation that there be a dismissal because this named party was not the one who was required to respond.
And not the original recipient either.
And was not the original recipient of the document request.
Can we work that into we can send it to the full task force, but raise two possible ways, of looking at it, that just to kind of focus their discussion that there are.
Well, we could put that
So we're not giving
into
a recommendation. We're just saying, look at this and look at that. To
Okay.
consider this and consider that. You know what I mean?
How about this? I'll withdraw what I said, but I'm going to say it again, and so it'll have a lot of the same content. All right. Arguably, there's jurisdiction, and this involves public documents. We're going to send this to the full task force. We want to put a spotlight on the concern that the respondent to this petition is different than the task force itself, who was the entity that received the public records request and had an obligation to respond to the public records request. So this respondent may be the wrong party to find a violation against.
But we otherwise make no recommendation, right? Is that,
But we otherwise make no recommendation.
I can second that.
Should I read it back?
Sure.
Chair Schmidt moves that there is jurisdiction, the records are public, and to send the matter to the task force and put a spotlight on the concern that the respondent to this petition is different than the task force itself, who was the entity that received the request and had an obligation to respond to the requester. This respondent may be the wrong party to find a violation against, but otherwise makes no recommendation. Second by Member Stein.
Okay, let's see if there's public comment.
Did I get that right?
Yes.
Ms. Cabrera, do we have any public commenters in the waiting?
Yes, I currently have 2 hands up, one being the complaint filer as well as another member of the public to speak to this item.
That would be Mr. Sullivan. He can't make a public comment.
Okay, thank you. So I will unmute the caller 292 when you're ready.
Caller, do you have a name?
Yeah, it's Patrick Manetsaw. Can you hear me?
Yes. Are you ready to start speaking, sir?
Yes.
Go ahead.
I know Mr. Sullivan vaguely because we both contribute to the Westside Observer newspaper. Mr. Sullivan wrongly named Bruce Wolf. Sullivan should have named the 2 SOTF administrators, Cheryl Leger and Victor Young, as the respondents. Bruce Wolf should be removed as a named respondent. To be fair to Mr. Sullivan, instead of making him start over from scratch, my recommendation is this. Recently, I filed a complaint against the Department of Public Health, and I named Health Commissioner Dan Bernal, and either Ms. Leger or Mr. Young removed Commissioner Bernal as a named respondent. I think you should amend your motion on the floor that if you're going to send it to the full task force, you do that today by removing Mr. Wolf as a named respondent so that Mr. Sullivan doesn't have to start all over from scratch. You guys have the power to remove a named respondent. You should do so today and just be done with the matter and not make the full task force wade through that discussion all over again. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, let's go ahead and vote.
Chair Schmidt?
Aye.
Chair Schmidt, aye. Member Stein?
Aye.
Member Stein, aye. Member Sugarman? Absent. Ready for the next item?
one second. That gets caught.
Okay, all right.
Microphones are off. Go ahead.
Yeah, and we have the same parties for the next matter.
The microphones are off so that you can talk.
Oh.
Wondering if we could make a second motion to change that.
All right, let's put this on the record.
But you think it's too messy? Okay. Okay, all right.
I think it, he tried to.
Pardon me, Cheryl. The microphones are still audible through WebEx.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah. Next item is between the same parties. And so there may be a lot of overlap, repetition. We do have an interest in figuring out how that matter may differ from the last matter. But let's go ahead and call Cheryl. Did you call the case? Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
Item number 6, file number 22116, complaint filed by Mark Sullivan against Bruce Wolf for allegedly violating Administrative Code Section 67.1 G as in George by allowing when a person or entity is before a policy body or passive meeting body, that person and the public has the right to an open and public process. 6721B as in boy by failing to comply with a request for public information.
All right. Let's hear from first from Mr. Sullivan. You have up to 3 minutes.
Okay.
Mr. Sullivan, you ready to get speaking, sir?
Yeah, just let me know. Go or what?
Yeah, I hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, after reminding Ms. Leisure that I had previously requested to receive notice of special meetings under the Sunshine Ordinance, they had not noticed me of the special meeting in January 25th. The next day, out of the blue, then Chair will officially challenge me on my claim of local media status. I gave him a dictionary definition of the media, as the Sunshine Ordinance does not have a definition for local media. He dismissed my definition. I asked, do you have a different definition? In his response, he claimed our office keeps a pretty solid service there, so there must be some sort of definition. How can you start a conversation and dismiss a definition without knowing the definition itself? He had 10 days to respond. But more important, in the last email, Mr. Chair Wolf states, I am not making any decision or suggesting any resistance yet. But he has made no decision, nor did he inform the full task force so that it could properly be considered. No action is an act of denial, as I have continued to not be notified of special meetings. I have not been given any definition that would remind me of such a notification. I have had no open or public process. I have just been ignored as if I do not matter, dismissed by a government agency that is supposed to uphold the people's right to know. I filed a complaint against the task force on this matter only to have it dismissed because the task force does not hear complaints against itself because of conflict of interest. How convenient. Your policy allows a few members to commit, bad behavior, and most task forces know nothing about it and are unable to review as a reflection of the task force. Your procedures and the task force denial of an open and public process, 67.1G, you hear my request to be notified of special meetings, which is in the Sunshine Ordinance. What is that based on? The only way a member of the public can be heard by the task force is by filing a complaint against one person. When no hearing and action is taken, that is denial and not reaching its decision in full view of the public. Section 67.1A in the Brown Act 54950. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you. When Cheryl's ready, we can hear from the respondent now.
Mr. Wolf, are you ready?
I am.
Go ahead, sir.
File 22116. The petitioner complainant claims that I denied them, quote, that I denied them quote, process to be considered a local media, unquote, and, quote, failing to comply for a request for public information, unquote. This is factually incorrect, and I find little to no merit to this allegation. The request, which was subject of the previous complaint that we just heard, 22115, was not a request to me directly, as you have made a motion to suggest the SOTF take into consideration. Further, I did not challenge or block or deny or take any action to prevent the petitioner or complainant access to anything. There are no facts in this complaint to show that I did. Instead, they did file a request to the SOTF Administration Office, and the process moved ahead as it did, without any obstruction from me. In fact, I had suggested to them, as I claimed in the previous complaint, that I assisted them. I told them where to go to ask for that information. As far as the statement with regards to that I'm not making any decisions or suggesting any resistance yet, that was clearly stating that I had no intention of taking any action at that time. In fact, if somebody had told me that the petitioner was not local media, then that would be a discussion to have then. But I didn't receive any of that information. I didn't talk to anyone about this interchange. It was just simply my curiosity, because I had not heard that Mr. Sullivan had been part of local media. As I stated in my response letter, I write numerous articles for my local neighborhood council and a widely distributed newsletter. Am I local media too? The question is, it is up for interpretation. Nonetheless, in this case, there's no wrongdoing. I'm not a department head, nor am I paid staff of the city, and I didn't take any action on it, and I don't feel that there is anything to correlate with the Sunshine Ordinance that would show that there was any non-compliance. So I contend that there was no wrongdoing or non-compliance on my part as the SOTF chair at the time with regards to this complaint, and respectfully request that this complaint be recommended to be dismissed. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, at this point, the members may have questions for the parties. Member Stein, anything?
I think I probably only have one question, which is for the petitioner. And maybe I've asked this in a different way, but I wanted to know, why did you not? I mean, it seems like there's two pieces to the complaint here that are, need to be looked at. One is, that you requested to be on a media list, to be informed about special meetings as 67.6F in the Sunshine Ordinance requires, and you were not added. And I'm wondering why you did not bring the complaint against the SOTF administrator rather than bringing it against Chair Wolf.
That's a good question. It's hard to say, because the duties of the chair shall preside over at meetings of the task force. The chair, working with the administrator and the task force members, shall oversee the preparation of the agenda for task force meetings. I don't know. Maybe I should be going against the administrator, but it's just like, who's in charge?
Yeah, I understand.
It's really frustrating, because I asked, a number of times. It's after every special meeting, I reiterate. So what to say.
Well, that's an important answer to me, so thank you. That was my only question.
Okay, to the petitioner. So you made a request to be added to the list, and that request, you made that to Mr. Wolf and Mr. Wolf only. Do I have that right?
No.
Okay.
The first request was to Ms. Lizer on February 1st, 2021, and that's Exhibit 1.
Okay.
That's 6 or 7 on your packet.
Got it.
And
Okay.
I didn't even, Mr. Wolf was the one who initiated contact with me. I did not initiate contact with him. And
Okay.
he used his full signature as chair.
Okay. And other than the two of them, did you have any contact with anyone else associated with the task force relevant to this 22116 complaint?
No, it's all my requests to be. Yeah, no, it's just Exhibit 3 shows that the thing also went to Mr. Yankee.
And in your
The
request,
email that Mr. Wolf emailed me on, but I didn't CC Mr. Yankee or anything. I didn't include him on that. That must have been Mr. Wolf that included him.
okay, and you still have not been added to the list for special notice. Is that accurate?
Well, as far as I know, there's no list. But all I'm asking is to be noticed of special meetings every time a special meeting happens, because they happen irregularly, so it's hard to keep track. All the meetings I can keep track of.
Okay, got it. All right. Okay. I don't have anything further.
We have discussion before a motion.
Yeah. We can. Yeah. Okay. So we may have more questions, but right now we're going to deliberate.
I have some strong opinions on some of this. So, on the one hand, there's, we're told there's no list. Cheryl did consult with Victor Young from Board of Supervisors, who said just direct people to the website to find out about meetings. But not only is it part of the Sunshine Ordinance to say that people should be able to request being notified by writing, which could also be email, of special meetings and so on. It's like in our own bylaws that we're supposed to do that, but we're not doing it, and we're getting direction not to do it. We're getting direction to send people to a website instead, which seems like a problem administratively, right? So I want to just kind of raise that. But then again, this is not what this complaint is directly about. This complaint, it raises all this, and I think that that would be a very valid complaint to say that we're not following our own bylaws and our own law about keeping a list, so that, because it's hard. People don't know when to go and check a website. It totally makes sense to me that there would be some kind of mailing list for people who want to be on it and want to be kept updated. But then there's the second question of whether Member Wolf, didn't respond to an information request. And I spent a lot of time kind of doing doing my little dive into that, looking at the Good Governance Guide, trying to look at what constitutes an information request. And I feel pretty convinced that the alleged request here was not sufficiently clear and well defined. It wasn't a clear and defined request for a public record. The statement that was made was, you know, if you don't think I'm local media, do you have a different definition? That to me is asking for a personal opinion, not records pertaining to how it's not clear that that's records pertaining to how the SOTF or the city defines local media. So I would be very hesitant to say that there was a real information request at issue in here, but I would be willing to say that there is a issue of potential violation of 67.6F, but that was, you know, so that I think is where we should focus and maybe try to iron out what our own process is. And then I just, you know, I think it's a bit complicated because, and I don't know if Mr. Sullivan is aware of this, but and maybe I'm going to state this wrong, but I feel like we don't directly supervise our administrator. We work with our administrator, but our administrator is directly supervised by people at the Board of Supervisors office. So it's not that we are dictating everything that our administrator does. Sometimes somebody else is dictating it, and it may be at odds with what we think should be done.
Yeah, my supervisor is just under the clerk of the board.
Right.
So that's whose direction
Yes.
I have to follow.
Yes. And I think that's just
And
not
Victor-
clear
yeah, and
necessarily to the
Victor
public.
often gets direction from her, but because he's been doing this for so many years, I was relying on his expertise and experience to figure out if there's a list. I'm happy to facilitate that. But if I'm being told something different,
Well, clearly there is no list, but our own bylaws and our own law says that we should have one. So I feel like we should have one, you know.
Okay, let me see if I can try to cover whatever I can throw in on this. But Member Stein, I think you pretty much got it right there. And the first thing is that it does seem like Mr. Sullivan has brought to us a problem. If the law says that there's supposed to be a provision for some kind of a special notice, then that is supposed to happen. And, you know, I don't know if a motion against Bruce Wolf is necessarily going to result in the finding of a violation arising out of that. But on the other hand, I do think that we need to take cognizance of this issue, and it does need to be looked at to some extent by the task force. I would also, I would pretty much be in agreement about the idea of the request for information being not quite specific enough to be the basis for a finding of a violation here. And I think that this seems that it's even a little more personally distant from Chair Wolf than the prior item. These seem like they really don't, there's nothing here I'm seeing that arises to any question as to whether he could be found to have been in violation of anything here. So the question is, you know, what to do. But I think I'm generally in agreement. And yeah, we got to figure out a way to satisfy that provision of the Sunshine Brown section. Yes, Member Stein.
I'm wondering if we might ask the petitioner if they would be willing to change the target of the violation to the SOTF or SOTF administrator for a potential violation of 67.6F, which clearly we haven't been following. I think that that would be worth sending to the task force, and might streamline the case and make it less complicated, because I don't see this as a violation on part of Chair Wolf. He's not involved in this process, really, even though he's suggesting, his email might seem to suggest that it's his decision. It's not his decision. It's an administrative function that's being directed by, the Board of Supervisors office, and it's being directed that we don't follow this provision of our own law. So I feel like it would be more productive to send this to the full task force if it was just a violation against the SOTF, or whoever should be maintaining those records at the SOTF, were we to be following this provision of the government code. So I guess I'm asking the petitioner if they would object to changing the recipient of this alleged violation.
So I just want to say that, I have no problem with that. I did do that. I filed a complaint against the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force, and it was rejected, because you guys don't hear complaints against yourself. And I also want to point out that in Bruce Wolf's emails to me, I did not take it as him responding to me personally, because he put down Bruce Wolf, Chair, SF Sunshine Ordinance Task Force. So as far as I was concerned, he was giving me an official response of some sort.
So wait, so this idea that we can't, because we said earlier that we thought we could hear complaints against ourselves, but you're saying you were told we could not?
No.
It's in your procedures.
A complaint against the task force is one that there was a decision, and I remember myself voting against it, but there was a decision that the task force will not hear complaints against the task force itself, as opposed to an individual member.
Oh,
That's the distinction, my understanding.
so that's
And so that's what Mr. Sullivan was, he brought this.
This is why you're getting these complaints. That's
Yeah.
why.
I see. Okay, well, if
And I
that's
went to the Ethics Commission. I've run, everywhere.
well, if that's the case, then I would say that I don't know. This doesn't seem to be a correct complaint. There's no records request here that I think should qualify as a records request. I would send it. Well, either send it to the task force and recommend dismissing it, or send it to the consent calendar with the recommendation that it be dismissed.
If I could suggest that, even though it could belong on the consent calendar, I think that we should maybe not do that, because I think that we want to do something which will put the substance before the task force of the list issue.
Okay.
That's so maybe, even though, we could make a recommendation, I'm fine with making a recommendation that we recommend that the task force dismiss as to Member Wolf, but I think we also should have the task force look at, and whether there's a decision that arises out of it, I don't know, but look at and respond to Mr. Sullivan's complaint about the lack of a list.
Comment on that?
Yeah, Ms. Leger, you want to comment on that?
I just want to say that in the 5 years I've been doing this, Mr. Sullivan has been the only person from the media who's requested any kind of an agenda or information to be provided to them. We've had members of the media testify in our room here. But right now, Mr. Sullivan would be the only person on that list.
Thank you. Thank you. And so we'll put you right at the top of the list, number one, Mr. Sullivan, when we make it.
I mean, I personally think it'd be great to have that list for even non-media people who are interested in like what, following the task force. But I don't know if you thought did you make a recommendation or can I make a motion?
Go ahead and make the motion.
So I might make a motion, I would make a motion to recommend that, or to say that these are public, well, no, to say that the task force dismiss the complaint against Member Wolf since there is no verifiable record request at issue, but have them look at whether there's a violation of 67.6F of the Sunshine Ordinance, which requires that the task force create a mailing list for people who want to receive notice of special meetings and their agendas.
Second.
Mr. Chair, can I just make I just have to ask a clarification on
Yes,
that.
you may.
Just the first part I get. The second part is it's a violation against who?
It's just as it stands.
But it's a violation against the task force? I mean,
I think that I'll ask Member Stein. I think that we're recommending to the task force that the allegations be dismissed against you. All allegations. Is that correct?
Yeah, and that we just look at this issue of whether we're if there's a violation of this policy. And I'm not specifying against who because it's unclear to me like that this is really properly a complaint against anybody, but
I'm just asking about pronouns. So when you say we, you mean SOTF, correct?
I do mean SOTF.
SOTF. Yeah, let's say SOTF. Yes. So yeah, the recommendation is that there be dismissal of anything against against Member Wolf. Yeah, and I second the motion.
Shall I read it back?
Yeah.
Sure.
Member Stein moves that the task force recommends that the matter against member and all allegations against Member Wolf be dismissed and to look at a violation of 67.6F of the ordinance, which requires the task force to create a mailing list to receive notice of special meetings and their attendance. That's it.
So something you missed at the beginning, and I was a little bit unsure of the language that was used there. I basically said that the task force dismiss the complaint against Member Wolf since there is no verifiable record request at issue. I just want to make sure that part doesn't get, reviewed because it's just, people can review it, but it's just, there was no request there. But we can add to that and all other allegations.
We want to go to public comment?
Yes, please. Any public commenters?
As a reminder to those that would like to make public comment for this item, please dial *3 to be added to the queue. There are currently no speakers to this item.
All right, we can have a vote then.
Member Stein?
Aye.
Member Stein, aye. Chair Schmidt?
Aye.
Chair Schmidt, aye. Member Sugarman, absent.
Thank you all. Okay, next item.
Did you want to take like a 5-minute break or?
Oh, sure. Yeah, 5-minute break.
I have 7:37 right now.
Okay, let's go to a quarter of 7:45, 8-minute break.
You said return at 7.
It's going to be so action-packed here today, did you?
I did not.
Yeah, this is where the action is, right, in this committee.
Your microphones are still live.
Okay.
Recording has resumed.
Chair Schmidt, are we ready for item number 7?
Yes, please.
Item number 7, file number 23058, complaint filed by Paul Neha against the San Francisco Municipal Transportation Agency for allegedly violating Administrative Code Section 67.5 by failing to allow meetings to be open in public, 67.13 by failing to allow access to an open and public meeting, and 6721 by failing to provide public records in a timely and or complete manner. It's the first time this case has been heard.
All right. So, petitioner Paul Neha, are you present?
One thing we didn't do, the vote on the last action, did we? We didn't.
No. Actually, let's go back. It was, we didn't vote. Okay, well, let's vote on, and then we'll.
Item number
get back
6.
To the Neha case, but we need to go back and vote in 22016.
22116. All right. Member Stein? Aye. Member Stein, aye. Chair Schmidt?
Aye.
Chair Schmidt, aye. Member Sugarman? Not present. Okay, so we shall resume the business of item number 7
Yeah. And
and get the petitioner.
we're trying to find if petitioner is present and available.
That would be Mr. Neha. Sir, are you available? Okay, I see him on an attendee list.
Okay.
Has been unmuted.
Thank you very much.
All right. And also, do we have somebody here on behalf of the SFMTA? Or is it? Yeah, I think that's right.
Yes, this is Hank Wilson from the SFMTA.
Okay. Okay. Great. So we will start. First, we'll have 3 minutes, up to 3 minutes from the petitioner when Cheryl's ready, and then we'll move on to respond after that.
Mr. Neha, you ready to begin speaking? Mr. Neha? Stephanie, can you unmute Mr. Neha? Because he needs to speak now as petitioner.
Yep, I
is
am
unmuted.
unmuted now. Thank you very much. All
Mr.
right.
Neha, Mr. Neha, are you ready to begin with your statement?
Yes, I am.
All right, you have 3 minutes. I'm going to start the timer right now.
Sounds good. On May 26, 2023, the SFMTA held a hearing with multiple violations of the procedures and the Brown Act. First, the SFMTA has failed to provide adequate notice to the public. The agency is required to post notices in the field 10 days in advance and prepare an affidavit of postings that certified that the notices were properly posted. It is required that the affidavit is signed and dated by the persons who posted the notices, and it's supposed to have copies of the pages that were posted attached to the affidavit. Only one affidavit has been submitted 10 days prior to the hearing, as required by SFMTA policy, and 2 other ones were prepared after the actual hearing and after I actually requested the proof that the notices were posted in accordance with the rules. Second, during the meeting, the hearing officer violated the provisions of Brown Act by implementing the policy where I specifically was not allowed to provide comments after my general questions were answered regarding a specific item. This change in policy was applied only to me, and all other speakers were allowed to speak as much as they found necessary. I also have to add that I attended over 90 color curve hearings conducted by at least 5 different hearing officers, and not a single time a speaker was barred or restricted to speak on any item on the agenda. For the context, the role of the hearing officer is to serve as a counterbalance to the powers of staff representing SFMTA, and it is the obligation of the hearing officer to ensure that the members of the public have ample opportunity to receive the answers to their questions and provide comments regarding the items based on the responses to the clarifying questions. I quote Hakam Ibrahim during the public hearing: "This is not an open forum. If we allow for any comments, if you have any questions, you should ask them now. Once we bring the team to answer them, we're closing the item and moving on to the next item, and I'm not coming back to you a second time." However, at this very meeting, Mr. Ibrahim allowed other speakers who were in favor of the items proposed by the SFMT to speak multiple times. Under the Brown Act, the public is guaranteed the right to provide testimony at any regular or special meeting on any subject which will be considered by the legislative body before or during its consideration of the item. The Act provides that the legislative body shall not prohibit a member of the public from criticizing the policies, procedures, programs, or services of the agency or the act or missions of the legislative body. Administrative code says that policy bodies must apply time limits uniformly to members of the public. For example, individual speakers favoring one side of the issue may not be given more time than individual speakers on the opposite side. And California government code that says that a meeting is a limited public forum, and policy body must give broad rein to speakers' right of self-expression so long as the comment relate to the specific agenda item or under general public comment to under the jurisdiction of the body. Third, the staff is required to read each item to into
Sir,
the
your
record.
time is up.
If you could just wrap up. Yeah.
I have one last item.
Yes.
Sorry, I'll try to be quick.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Third, the staff is required to read each subject item to the record completely, including the legal description of the location of each proposed zone change. This requirement serves two important functions. One, it puts on the record the technical specifications of the proposed zone change, and it provides members of the general public or visually impaired or can read for other reasons with information that they have a right to know. Failure to read the complete legal description of the proposed change is the violation of Americans with Disabilities Act. Given the multiple violations, I'd like to request the results of the public hearings are nullified and another hearing is held. I also believe that it is the interest of the public that Mr. Hakam Ibrahim does not facilitate any color curb hearings in the future. That's all. Thank you, and sorry that I ran over.
That's all right. Okay. Now, next, we can hear from the respondent.
Your name, sir?
Hi, my name is Hank Wilson.
Hank
I work at the SFMTA.
Okay. Just a moment, sir. Are you ready, sir?
I am.
Go ahead.
Thanks, task force members, for taking the time today. My name is Hank Wilson, and I lead the curb management team at the SFMTA. And part of the job of my team is to administer the color curb hearing that Mr. Kaniha was referring to. It's a monthly hearing where we hear mostly applications from businesses to put loading zones in front or short-term parking zones near or in front of their businesses. It's administered by a hearing officer, and then there's also a staff person from my team who is in attendance to read items into the record and answer questions that may come up during the hearing. We've been advised by the Deputy City Attorney that this hearing is not subject to the Brown Act, and thus this task force doesn't have jurisdiction because it's held by a single hearing officer. It's not a legislative body with multiple people meeting and risking talking to each other without the public being aware. And I will point out that a lot of the things that Mr. Kaniha says are required are not actually required, at least as far as we understand. He talked about an affidavit of posting being signed. It is required that we post notice of the hearing in the area where we're making changes out on the street. That's in the San Francisco Transportation Code, and we do that before every hearing. There's no requirement that the folks who are doing that posting actually sign an affidavit. When Mr. Kaniha requested it, I think similar to an earlier item on this agenda where someone requested something, this body, the task force, thought that's actually a good idea. We should create that document. And so we had the same thought. That's a good idea. We should create it. We created affidavits for that, the posting for the hearing that Mr. Kaniha is complaining about, and then we have been doing affidavits on the hearing since, because we do think it makes good sense. Mr. Kaniha said that staff is required to read each item into the record in full detail. I'm not aware of any requirement in that regard. The items are posted, like I said, on telephone poles or utility poles in the area where changes are made. They're also posted on the SFMTA website. They're also posted on the screen for folks who are tuning in virtually. And then staff will read a shorthand version of the item. So they'll say, item number 12 is about a passenger loading zone on the block of Pine Street between Fillmore and Webster, to give a general idea of the location that we're talking about. So again, I don't think that there's any requirement in that regard. There was one other section of the complaint that Mr. Kaniha didn't refer to, where he requested a transcript of the May 26th color curb hearing. We didn't produce a transcript because one doesn't exist, and as far as we know, we're not required to keep a transcript, but we do keep an audio visual recording of the hearing, and we did turn that over to Mr. Kaniha in response to his request. So thanks very much.
All right, thank you. Okay, now there may be questions that we may ask of the parties. This is the time when members may have questions. Member Stein, I've got one that, let me just start with a quick question. For Mr. Kaniha, is it part of your claim that there are any documents that you requested that have not yet been produced to you?
Maybe muted. We're not hearing you if you're speaking.
His hand is up.
I wonder if, we can't hear Mr. Neha. Not sure.
Stephanie, we can't hear Mr. Neha, the petitioner. Stephanie, we are not hearing from Mr. Neha.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I was muted, so I couldn't unmute. It says I can't unmute myself. So yes, I did. I did also request the records of training that Mr. Ibrahim has received regarding the procedures that he's required to follow and the rules that he's required to follow when he's conducting a public hearing. But that information was not turned into me. So I would consider that a separate item. And I wanted to hear it at the same hearing, but as a separate item.
Okay. And to the respondent, I'll ask you about those documents. Is it your understanding that there are any documents that exist in your agency's possession that have not yet been produced that were requested?
Well, that's a tough one to answer because Mr. Kaniha has made dozens of public records requests to us lately, and I don't know exactly the status of all those. Not all of those are directed at me or my staff. I think the training documents that Mr. Kaniha referred to, that's not a records request that has come across my desk, I think, because it wasn't directed at me. But as far as I can tell, it is a separate request that's not covered by this particular task force complaint.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm going to hand over to Member Stein. Any questions?
Yeah. So there are at least 3 public records requests that are referenced in the petitioner's file, and I'm just wondering if the petitioner can specify the exact record request that he believes is at issue here and what its number is.
We're not hearing anything. I wonder if there's a muting going on again.
And I'll just add that even though there are 3 different requests that are mentioned in the respondent's information, they reference one specific request, which is 23-3041. Is that the correct request that you believe is at issue? Is my question for the petitioner.
Yeah, so this is the I don't have the exact number of the request. I can I'm looking
This
it
was
up right
the
now.
request for all communications around the public hearing, but I don't remember it specifically asking for details about how hearings are conducted.
Yeah, so like I said, those are 2 separate issues. So it just for some reason, they just happen to be bundled into one item, but they're actually two separate issues. I wanted both of them heard at the same hearing, but as a separate items. So one item is specifically the violations during the public hearing, and the second item that I wanted to be heard is the requested specific records of training that Mr. Ibrahim has received in order to conduct these hearings, and all I received is like the records of him getting like a safe driving course and stuff like that. But there was nothing that indicated anything, any kind of training that he received in this specific subject matter. So that's the separate item that I wanted to be heard.
Okay. Hang on. And then, let's see, I had another question for the petitioner. What evidence did you provide in the packet to show that time limits during this meeting were not applied uniformly?
So the public hearing itself, there is a recording of the public hearing, and even though the Teams meetings, they have an automated feature of transcribing the everything that is being said. So that's what I requested, so I can add it to the as an evidence. So
Okay. It's not currently in the packet, right?
yeah, SFMTA says it doesn't exist, but
well, the transcript doesn't exist, but the recording of the meeting exists.
yes, it does.
But you
yes.
haven't given us specific examples from the meeting to show us that time limits were not.
So I provided a quote where Mr. Ibrahim says that he will not allow me to speak second time, but
maybe he didn't allow other people to speak a second. Like we can't tell from the packet.
But yes, so there's no evidence in the packet, but from the recording, it can be seen that, or can be heard that he is allowing other people to speak multiple times on the same item.
And then a question for the respondent. See, I'm not even sure this is the same public records request, but I'm wondering, do you know which public records request, which number it is that deals with the trainings, and can you walk us through the timeline of what your response to that request was?
Yeah, this is Hank Wilson. Unfortunately, I can't. I don't know. I'm not familiar with that public records request for the trainings, because I think, as Mr. Kaniha said, it was directed at Mr. Ibrahim, who's a hearing officer at SFMTA and works in a different division. And in fact, the hearing officers are very intentionally sort of walled off from the policy staff.
Okay. I think those are my questions.
Sure. Respondent, Mr. Wilson, tell me a little bit more about the hearing officer. Where does the hearing officer, you said they're walled off. What is their position within the SFMTA other than doing these hearings? And I'll just say, to start with, specifically this hearing officer.
That's a good question. Can you all still hear me? Can anybody hear me? I lost a video there and I can't hear anything now.
Hello?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah. The question for Mr. Wilson.
Okay, sorry, the video went blank there on the task force. So again, I'm certainly not an expert in the structure of the the hearing officer side of the SFMTA. I know that they help conduct hearings like the color curve hearing, like our engineering public hearing where we talk about parking and traffic changes. They also are the folks who review citations and like protested citations. So if you get a parking ticket and you want to contest it, it goes, I think, to our adjudication division. And then if you want to go one step higher than that, you go to a hearing and you're heard by one of these hearing officers. And then if you don't like the result that you get from the hearing officer, then you can take it to the Superior Court. So that's another one of the roles that hearing officers have. But with respect to these public meetings, their role is to call the meeting to order, then to close the meeting when it's done, to call upon folks who are going to speak, to enforce things like time limits for speakers, very similar to what a board or commission secretary would do, but they're the only person who's the only sort of official person who's hosting the meeting.
You're saying that the hearing officer doesn't make any decisions during this kind of hearing?
That's correct.
But who does make decisions?
So in that case, in the case of the color curve hearing, the city traffic engineer will make the ultimate decisions. Transportation Code Section 201, I believe, lays out the different kinds of parking and traffic changes that can be made, and who can make those decisions and how much, what kind of hearing is necessary. So there's some things that the city traffic engineer can do without a hearing. There's some things that the city traffic engineer can decide after a hearing. And then there are some things that need to be decided by the MTA board of directors.
Okay, so the hearing officer is sort of administratively running the show at this, but the decision maker is the engineer. Is that correct?
The city traffic engineer, correct.
City traffic engineer, okay.
It's a specific position that's also laid out in the transportation.
The city traffic engineer makes a sequence of decisions based on the information that's set forth during these hearings, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
And also, I mean, of course, we're happy to take comments and questions and support and opposition in any other way.
Okay.
People call in and email and all the time, even if it's not in the context of a specific public hearing.
And with these decisions that this engineer would make, do any of these then have to go to the board for final approval?
Right. So like I said, the section 201 of the transportation code lays out that has essentially those three lists of the things that the city traffic engineer can decide without a hearing, and then the things that the city traffic engineer decides after a hearing, and then there are things that the city traffic engineer does not have the final call on. The MTA board of directors has the final call.
Okay. So is it your understanding that on what we're looking at here today, that these are in that middle category of the engineer cannot make these without a hearing, so therefore there has to be a hearing. On the other hand, the engineer makes a decision and it doesn't need to go to the SFMTA. Is that your understanding of what this category decisions are?
Yes.
Okay. Got it. And so your understanding is that the city traffic engineer involved in these hearings makes that decision, and that decision is then final, correct?
In most cases, there are some about, I don't know exactly how many years ago, a few years ago, the Board of Supervisors amended the transportation code to say that there are some types of decisions that can be appealed to the Board of Supervisors. And that list of those types of parking and traffic changes that can be appealed to the Board of Supervisors don't necessarily fit neatly into those three buckets of the three lists of things. So there can be things that I don't know all of them off the top of my head, but like
Okay,
I said, I think
that's
there's
fine. That's
different
fine.
types of things that can be changed.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. All right. I don't think I have any other questions for the parties. Member Stein, last chance. No? Nothing. Okay. So we're now going to deliberate, and basically we're looking at are there document issues here? Do we have a Brown Act, not Brown Act, but Brown Act Sunshine? Do we have a Sunshine Brown issue? And we have heard that the respondent claims that there can't be a public meetings issue here because this is not a legislative body, it's a policy body, and that may be the case, but we can't really make a final call here. We're just deciding whether these issues should be taken up at the full task force, and if we have any recommendations, et cetera, et cetera. So, Member Stein, any initial thoughts?
My initial thoughts are, I think it's difficult to go forward with a 6721 violation for timeliness when the relevant complaint at issue doesn't appear to be in this packet. I don't know where it is, but it doesn't seem to be here. The complaint about the trainings, getting information about the trainings, I don't see it in the packet.
Okay.
And then my sense is there is, it probably isn't a public hearing since it's not a legislative or a policy body, but I'm not sure where that leaves us in terms of what we want to do with bringing it to the task force.
Well, it says that you believe that, there's a request, a written request that would describe training materials, and that it was the subject of a complaint to the task force, which is, I guess, this complaint.
But it doesn't seem to be to have been submitted to this person, to this.
Yeah, it was my thought that maybe.
And I don't see it in the packet. There are 3 complaints in the packet, but I didn't see one that seemed like it covered, how people are trained for this.
Yeah,
and what the rules are for this.
And I was myself sort of seeing that as being that maybe Mr. Neha is thinking of one of the other requests he's made for training materials, but it actually, this complaint, 23058, may actually not have included any of the training material requests. I don't know. That was just my reading of it. Maybe I'm not seeing something.
Okay,
I don't know, but you're saying that maybe we need to line that up somehow. What do you think that?
I mean, there doesn't, if it's the request that the respondent says is at issue here, then there seems to be no remaining, that everything was supplied. And the petitioner didn't seem to have anything to say otherwise about the request that seems to be the request at issue here.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just not sure that we need to look at a violation there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not, but I have to say this packet is really confusing to me because there were so many records, 3 records requests in here. It's not clear which one we're supposed to be taking up. Yeah, so I don't, I'm a little confused at this point.
I Yeah, I didn't think that I was not really seeing anything very powerful in terms of the documents. I mean, I thought that this basically involved the the posting notices, and maybe they came in late, so we've got a timing issue, but eventually they were produced. In terms of the hearing itself, I will just note to Mr. Nia that we don't nullify here. We don't have the power to change the results of any kind of hearing. The only thing that we do is we decide was there a violation of the law with regard to documents, the law with regard to meetings, but we can't order a nullification. And that's something that, well, technically people go to court to do that kind of thing, but that's not something that we do here. We may be able to find that there's a violation, but I don't know if that helps you to get anything rescinded. I think that there might be a factual question as to whether whether the notices were properly posted. It sounds like there's a contention that they weren't properly posted, but SFMTA says no, there's no requirement that they be posted in a certain way. We do it voluntarily. And I'm not saying that I'm agreeing with either side on that. It's not something we can decide here today. And we can, make a determination as to what we think and make a recommendation, but ultimately a decision may have to be made by the task force on that kind of issue. And also on the issue of whether this is even a brown sunshine kind of meeting, because this is a single hearing officer. And it really does look like single hearing officer means no, it's not brown, it's not sunshine. So that's why I was asking questions about whether this hearing officer was just sort of doing a preliminary screening on behalf of a larger body. And it doesn't seem like that's what was going on here. And so, but again, we can't, we as a committee, we don't make the final decisions. I don't necessarily see a strong case that there were brown sunshine violations with regards to how the meeting was conducted. I'm not necessarily seeing any problems with that. I'm not seeing anything obvious with regards to documents. I agree with Member Stein that there may be something that's, it's either, it's the file is by nature confused, or maybe it's just got to be cleared up before this thing goes before the full task force. I don't know, but it's unclear as to whether training documents were even requested with regards to what we're sitting here looking at here today.
Can I just add too that if this case does go forward, I think it's very important for the petitioner to really try to show and direct us to specific parts and to be able to give us tell us where we can see a copy of this recording, and tell us some specific parts where you can show that the time limits were not applied uniformly. You can't just sort of state it. You need to really point us to the evidence. So I want to just recommend that if it goes forward, that you consider putting that into the packet, because it would help your case potentially.
Yeah, you would need to be more specific about why it is that you believe certain people were treated differently than other people. And you'd have to have some kind of factual basis for that, as opposed to, something of the nature of, well, I just know it happened because I saw it. Something more specific than that. Yeah. Okay, I don't know how much we can steer this in terms of what we tell the task force.
Maybe they should consider whether it's a public hearing, whether a legislative or policy body is involved, and probably not, I mean, I don't know what to do about the records request because it's just so confusing, but to focus on the public hearing part of it and whether this is whether they want to deciding whether this is a public hearing first and foremost, and then if they do believe it's a public hearing, to look at whether regulate the way it was regulated was applied uniformly.
Okay, I'll make a motion.
I was unmuted. Does that mean I can speak or?
You're unmuted, but we're basically at the decision stage. So, but thank you for answering our questions. So what we're going to do is I'm going to make a motion here to send this to the full task force. I believe that this was a meeting that took place in a public office. I'm not saying that necessarily means it's covered as a public meeting per se under the Brown Act or the Sunshine Act. And we have jurisdiction. There were public documents here. We have jurisdiction over those. My motion is that we send this to the full task force with two emphases. First, to determine as a threshold issue whether the hearing here falls under Sunshine or the Brown Act provisions at all. Two, it is important to match up the specific document request or requests that are actually at issue here with the claims that certain documents have not been produced that are specifically made. That's it.
Specifically?
That are specifically made.
Issue here with certain claims or with claims made that certain documents have not been produced.
Yeah. Of certain documents not produced.
But I would say with claims made rather than claims and then that have been made, having that dingling modifier at the end is confusing.
Guilty as charged. So that is my motion.
Okay, I'll second it.
Shall I read it back?
Yep.
Read it back, okay. Moved by Chair Schmidt to send this matter to the task force with two emphases. First, to determine as a threshold issue whether the hearing falls under the Sunshine or the Brown Act provisions at all. Second, it is important to match up the specific document request or requests that are at issue here with the claims made that certain documents have not been produced. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Public,
that's something the petitioner should pay attention to and maybe try to clarify with some kind of submission which public records request he believes is at issue in this. I mean, no, I'm just saying this to the petitioner.
Okay.
That you would make a stronger case if you had just one records request that in there and it was germane to whatever you have requested of where's the top of this, of the SFMTA with regards to this complaint.
and again, the motion's already stated
Yeah,
and seconded.
the motion is
So
there.
this is just,
Asking the petitioner
Yeah.
to
this is further
take it-
discussion.
yeah. Yeah.
And I'll just say that however the sunshine complaint that was numbered 23058, however that came in to the office from Mr. Neha, that will be the answer to, I think, what the scope of the documents requested are that can be determined and looked at in this 23058 as it goes forward. So I think we're ready for public comment on this.
Ms. Cabrera, do we have any public commenters?
Only the complainant has raised their hand.
Yeah, no public comment. The parties can't make public comment. And so it sounds like we don't have anyone who's eligible who wishes to make public comments. So let's, I think we know how we're going to resolve this, and it's going to, if the vote doesn't change, we'll be sending it forward to the task force. So let's have a vote.
Chair Schmidt?
Aye.
Chair Schmidt, aye. Member Stein?
Aye.
Member Stein, aye. Member Sugarman, absent.
Thank you to the parties. We can move on to the next matter.
Item number 8, file number 23062, complaint filed by Stillian Bajanski against the Treasurer and Tax Collector's Office for allegedly violating Administrative Code Section 6721 by failing to provide responsive records in a timely and/or complete manner.
All right. Is Mr. Bajanski here present today?
I have unmuted both participants. We have Christopher Terrell and a non-participant listener.
Okay. Is Stiljan Bajanski present? Not here, it looks like.
They are
Okay.
not online now.
Okay, got it. All right. If Mr. Bajanski doesn't show up within the next minute, I think we'll probably be what's the terminology?
The petitioner was not present for the
Tabling
hearing,
it or something?
and we will table the matter per complaint procedure 7B.
Okay. And yeah, I'll just make one more request, just because technology, you never know. But it sounds like we know that Stiljan Bajanski's not here, and so At this point, I think we will table this. I will make a motion to table the matter according to the rules.
Member Stein, you're going to second?
Yeah, I second that.
Public comment is next.
Ms. Cabrera, do we have any public commenters?
There are no public commenters for this item.
All right,
All right,
let's
thank you.
vote.
Chair Schmidt?
Aye.
Chair Schmidt, aye. Member Stein?
Aye.
Member Stein, aye. Member Sugarman? Absent. Okay, we have one more item.
Okay, and this is a discussion item, number 9. Go ahead and call it.
Okay, item number 9, discussion proposing edits to expedite complaint process per ordinance requirements. This is a continuing discussion we had last month, right? From
Yes.
September.
Yes. And what I think that we ought to do is I want to actually have some of this discussion today. And it is continuing from last month. But because the third member of this committee's not here, I think maybe we were hoping that they would be here. And so we wanted to leave some of the discussion for that time, but maybe this should be put over. However, Member Stein, I know, has some good information on this, and I might be able to chime in once or twice with a decent idea or two that I've had.
Before we get into the discussion, I did try and text Member Sugarman to find out what he missed or why. Was he okay? Haven't heard anything.
Okay. Yeah, I was pretty sure from the last time the full task force that, because I was just thinking of this, he said he wasn't going to be here. So, yeah. And so I was anticipating that.
So I was just trying to think through this again in like a different way and just think about what are the core questions that we might want to try to answer to help us come to an idea of how to make the procedure better. And so the first question I had was, does a complaint need to go to committee at all? What is the value added to the process of going to committee? And what is the purpose of hearing it in committee ideally? Right now, we have this sort of three-pronged thing in our procedures that it goes to committee to decide if it's public info under our jurisdiction and see if we have recommendations to make, right? But two of those things, if it's public information under our jurisdiction, it's rarely do we really decide it here, even if it's up for debate. And the real question is it up for debate or not, right? And so if it's not even up for debate, then does it need to go to the committee to just sort of reconfirm that, right? So it seems like option one is we can let the committee, well, actually, I should say, thinking about what is the value added of committee. We also have that we can talk about if there's missing information or incomplete files, which we kind of did tonight, for instance. We can make public recommendations, look at jurisdiction. And in theory, we could make determinations, but that's not what we do right now. But that seems like the kind of range of things we could potentially do. So I was thinking like one option is we can think of committee as a place where you sort of triage cases, deciding which require full hearings, which we could possibly vote determinatively on if it doesn't require a full hearing, or what we need to forward. And option two is let the the full SOTF triage the cases and decide which require full hearings and which simply can be voted on without a hearing process. So it's just that question of like, what is the purpose of committee, right? And ideally, and where do we think there's value added? And then another question is, if we were to think about deciding some cases determinatively in committee, what would be the criteria, for those cases that we could decide determinatively? And I think we've talked about this already a little bit, but, we talked about, for instance, cases in which all records have been provided, where there's no dispute over jurisdiction or public records. We could go beyond that and say something like, oh, maybe we only want to decide cases that are purely about timeliness, because there's often a clear picture there, fact-based picture, like, was it timely or was it not timely? Or maybe we want to say something like, oh, there has to be unanimity among committee members. But the core question here is like, what could we decide determinatively, and what would need to be the, kind of requirements for that?
Laura, I'm having trouble hearing you.
What cases could we potentially decide determinatively? Or maybe alternatively, a question would be, what cases can we not decide determinatively, right? And have sort of a set of stipulations for that, like cases where there's significant doubt and complexity, or cases where the law is vague or unclear, cases where there's a lack of unanimity, questions or disputes of jurisdiction, or questions or disputes of the public nature of the documents. But then in that case, we would know some of that in advance, and it wouldn't even necessarily have to go through committee. If outstanding documents exist, or if disputed redactions exist, maybe those are things that we can just triage right out of committee and not have to look at. And we also probably want to think about, what kind of safeguards exist if something is decided determinatively in committee. Is it still something we want to send to a consent committee for, possibly pulling it? Obviously, there's still an appeals process. And then I just have this question of, can some cases just be fast-tracked to the full SOTF if they meet certain criteria and just, not go through a committee again? Is another way to kind of think about it. So, if there are cases where there's significant disputes about jurisdiction or public nature of records, maybe that doesn't, maybe that's a checkoff item for the respondent. And if they check it off that they dispute it, just send it to the full SOTF. Why have it go through committee first? And that would, cut down on the time it takes. So those were kind of the ways I'm thinking about the main questions right now.
Just one little point. You said something about an appeals process. I don't know what that is.
If we make a decision determinatively, there's always been, even if it's made by the full SOTF, that petitioners can appeal that decision, right? If there's new information or, facts that come up.
You mean a reconsideration?
I guess I'm talking about reconsideration. Yeah. So I don't.
New facts. That's not an appeal. It's a new fact.
Yeah, I guess it's not an appeal.
Situation.
So I guess I'm just saying,
Okay.
yeah, then, what safeguards would we have? And maybe it's the unanimity. Maybe it's like it meets certain stipulations. Maybe there are no safeguards or second chances.
Yeah.
Maybe it just goes to reconsideration like any other case would go if there's a reason to reconsider.
Okay.
And maybe I'm thinking about this wrong. I don't know. But these were just, I felt like if we could answer these questions, maybe we would find the elegant solution.
Well, the one thought I have, and I think that to me, the 45-day rule, it's a rule, and that's important. And to me, it's a concept, it's a principle. It's to me almost like the way things should be. And so that is and I know that like it's so far from what happens right now. It's almost like different universes. In terms of what a committee does with a case, I think that the way it works right now is it makes very little sense to me. The committee, to me, either has to do a lot less or a lot more. I'm not sure which. It might be that partly because I think to get people to vote for it, people seem to like committees and the idea of committees. I mean, I was thinking that some of these things could be done without it being called a committee process. But maybe one different way of constructing this that was not in last year's proposals, but it would sort of dovetail with what you had just said, Member Stein, and what we also talked about last time is the idea that the committee becomes almost like it becomes the review triage. It's triage. It's review. And I really like the idea of taking the initial review and not having it be, people come into hearings and they all get to talk and then everyone gives public comment. No. We could have meetings in a public forum, but we could do a lot of what we've got to do and people could sit and watch us if they want. But that's not going to be very fun for them, but that's their call. But we would be basically, say conceptually taking, say this month's 20 cases. Once we got up to date, 20, 25, 15, whatever, and we say, what are we going to do with every single one? And like you said, we'd have guidelines. We probably need to come up with some kind of language for how we categorize cases. Maybe we would have, like 6 or 7 categories of cases. Delay only, documents already produced. And then on the other hand, novel legal question would be, or maybe, we have something that you see in courts where it's like significant issue, something where we would not necessarily say, oh, we're going to have a committee hearing for this. No, instead we'd say, no, this needs to go to the full task force. Done, gone. And then once it's ready, but hoping that it goes fast to the full task force. I mean, hoping that every single one of them moves fast, whether it's going to the full task force or not. But that triage step, in a way, we'd be doing less than what we're doing here because we wouldn't have people talking. We'd say, you submit it on your papers, and then we'll decide how this is going to move forward. Maybe we would take some of the cases and say that we keep them in this committee or send them to another committee. But other cases, we just send them right to that task force, right to a consent calendar, or we make some that we might decide. It seems like we could create some categories where we have a rule that allows us in the complaint committee to decide certain cases.
And they could be decided without a hearing potentially. They're just decided based on the packet from the petitioner, the respondent, presuming it's clear.
On the
There's no-
papers.
on
Yeah.
papers without a hearing.
Yeah.
But then maybe there needs
Yeah.
to be some kind of process where if the ruling is against a petitioner and the petitioner is unhappy with the ruling, maybe some kind of, they can request to have it heard by the full task force, and we could, and the full task force could decide if they want to hear the whole thing.
That would be problematic to me
Why?
because everyone who doesn't get what they want will make that request.
But the task force could look at it and decide, we believe this warrants a hearing or we don't believe this warrants a hearing.
But then we've just like the problem with that is that it kind of like puts back in everything that we were trying to cut out in that step where unless there's a specific standard, but you're basically, I guess, saying that then there's a discretionary move, but then the full task force has to read the whole file to decide whether they want to grant this thing. Whereas what I'm saying, okay, let me put it this way. There is nothing in the ordinance that says that every single case gets a hearing.
That's true, but it does say that a petitioner can request a hearing.
Yes.
Right? And so all we're doing is we're deciding at a committee level, we think this needs a hearing, we think this doesn't need a hearing, potentially making a decision, but then it still gives the task force, they could still decide that it needs a hearing as a kind of fail-safe process. I do also just want to mention that we decide in favor last year, just based on the annual report, we decide in favor of the petitioner like 90% of the time. So it's not that there's going to be probably tons and tons of cases where it's ruled against the petitioner, and the petitioner, and all they're doing is still holding on to that right to request a hearing, but now instead of the committee deciding, the task force would have to reaffirm that we don't need a hearing or we do need a hearing to decide this. Like, we agree with this decision or we don't, we think it's problematic and we need a hearing at the full task force level. And as it is already, the full task force has to read every case. So we're now narrowing it down to some very much smaller subset of cases that we've ruled against where they want a hearing. And then that has to be read by the full task force. That's the only, I understand what you're saying, but I don't know in practice that it would be as many cases as one might think. That would, they might all ask for it, but then that would be maybe 10% of. But the other thing I do want to mention is
that's a very good point, that a lot of the cases that would be would be decided by the complaint committee might be decided for a complainant, and you probably would not have the respondent coming in asking for a whole new process.
No, it's not the respondent, it's the petitioner would have to ask for the process.
So you're saying a respondent couldn't ask for a new, to have the whole task force, you would only give that to the petitioner?
Isn't that how reconsideration works, for instance? It's the petitioner that can ask for reconsideration. I didn't think it was the respondent who could ask for reconsideration.
I don't know. But remember, reconsideration is different.
Yeah.
That's really important. I think you got a strong point where you say the 90%, 10%. Sure.
And the only other thing I wanted to say is like you talked about like doing the triage when we have like 20, 25 cases. I can't imagine trying to plow through 20, 25 cases. I mean, I think it would have to be distributed. I think the cases would have to be distributed among more committees
It could be.
to process. I mean,
yeah.
it's hard to read more than, 6 cases in the 5 days that we have
Yeah.
between receiving a packet and having a meeting. Like
Yeah.
I wouldn't up that number too much, but maybe I would fan out the work.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you're right. Basically, it's based on whatever comes in 1 month. If actually we're trying to stay on the schedule that the ordinance requires, then every month you kind of have to get on it.
Mm-hmm.
And so somebody's got to like get it to where a determination and an order would potentially be made. And so, yeah, it could be that like it's not all going through this complaint committee. Maybe it be farmed out elsewhere, and you sort of have some uniform standards for like what are the piles, what are the buckets that you throw, this one goes over there, this one goes over there, this one goes over there. Yeah, I guess that's right. The prep doesn't really, for anyone who's preparing to decide one of these, you still have to read the file. So that doesn't, you don't save any time on that. We're just trying to like save time on people just telling us what we already know and
prevent cases from effectively being heard twice, even though the first time like no decision can really be made.
Yeah, exactly. The no decision committee, and then useless public comment, which it's just there because we have too many hearings of the same thing. Yeah. Nice. Okay.
But I haven't obviously totally thought it through on like if you would have an appeal or how that would make sense. So that's that's
Yeah.
definitely something to continue thinking of.
Yeah, that's a weird one to me. I mean, I understand that you're right. If it turns out that it's not that often, it's just petitioners. Maybe it just doesn't happen that often, and it doesn't become an issue. Although I'd hate to have it be that people know that they've just got an automatic ability to like, oh, well, I'll just appeal it kind of thing, because then they don't really set it up like seriously for that, get your order in the 45 days. Because one of the things I think we're trying to do in this sort of like conceptual universe that we're talking about is that someone files one of these sunshine complaints and it's like game on, like, okay, well, you're looking at 45 days. So you got to get your stuff in, and because we're going to get you an order in 45 days, and they're suddenly on the clock. And they may say, whoa, I just wanted the 6-month plan. I don't want the 45-day plan. Of course, then there's waivers. I know they used to do like waivers of time. Maybe we give people, the ability to waive time and let it take, a lot longer than 45 days.
Like request continuances and things.
Well, yeah, for the petitioner. Although to me, the 45 days, I'm not sure if legally, to me, a petitioner even has a right to waive, because that shall might be a jurisdictional requirement to me. And I think that the respondent may actually be entitled, and the public may be entitled to a process that goes really fast.
Mhm.
And I think that's what the original design was. And
Maybe no appeal. It's not mentioned anyway, right? It's in the ordinance.
no, there's nothing mentioned about how like you have to have all the members have to have some
Yeah, there isn't.
vote on everything. That's not mentioned anywhere. That's like added on by people who had their ideas later on.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're probably right. I guess I was thinking about it only because I just anticipate this objection that, oh, well, 3 people should not be deciding it, or some smaller committee should not be deciding it. And what if,
Yeah.
this larger committee this larger task force had perspectives the smaller committees don't have. But if you have the right criteria in place, then maybe it doesn't need to be something that you offer appealability, because you don't have to give a hearing anyway. You're just supposed to make a determination. And so you've decided this is the process to make the determination.
Yeah, I mean, to me, like, it's a luxury we can't afford to give everyone all this extra due process.
No, we certainly hear complaints on a regular basis from petitioners about how they didn't get the information when they needed it. They've spent 2 years trying to get this case heard, or whatever it is. We hear that so often, and that I think is really important to rectify.
Yeah. That's I think that one thing that I think is like the biggest injustice that I'm seeing is 2 years is just to me outrageous. But I think I'll make that the last thing that I'll really go into.
Okay. And then I think the idea that the determination would be just determinative at the committee level, we really have to have a strong set of criteria that make it clear that these cases are, very easily decidable by a few people.
That chart that's now in the Excel, it's sort of an improved chart. I think that chart, having that and having it like as like being able to run with that chart, it's almost like we could have either this committee or whoever else is involved, basically on the chart, looking at what's going on in this month, et cetera. And everything is going to like be documented on that chart. And at some point it just gets, I think, much more efficient where you're running off the chart and using the chart. So that helps to know that that's a way that everyone who's involved is sort of like got a common factor, the chart itself, where they can kind of input something, then someone can go back to the chart and see it, as opposed to, waiting to see what a file is going to look like. Having that chart is possibly going to be integral to any kind of better system than what we have right now.
Can I just ask, what is on the chart? Like, what are the data fields on the chart?
Information. The chart is a forward tracker to understand where an item will be going next, or what we are waiting on for additional information on. So it's a capture of the status of a complaint. There's the opportunity to add additional fields. For example, multiple cases by the same petitioner, if that is useful to you. There was also interest in understanding the time that had elapsed between actions. That's information that I'll need to discuss with Victor Young to understand what's needed. That is information that can be added. If you have ideas about metrics that you would like, we can provide what we can.
Yeah, I'm looking at fields here. And one of the things that I think is interesting is I tried to create a chart that was a little bit similar when I was doing the annual report, where I was just trying to look at the dates, like when a case was filed, when it went to a committee, when it went to the next committee, what its progression was through the task force until it reached its decision by the full task force. Because I was trying to chart out, like, here's day one of the case. Okay, it was heard, 100 days later in a committee, and then 50 days later in another committee, and then by the task force 50 days later, and therefore it's been in the system for like 200 days or whatever it is. So I think it would be really useful to have the dates at which it goes to different committees, so we can track, like, how long is it before it actually gets resolved, and what are the different places it went. But it looks like that's mostly here, right?
Yes, that was a 5-year look back on actions.
The ones that are in the system right now.
The ones that are
the
in the
ones that are in the
system now.
system, because some of them went to multiple different committees and were heard in committee more than once. I was trying to look at how many times was a case in a committee to be heard, right? And how many days in between, just what was the full time period that it was in the system before it finally got decided determinatively, usually by the full, always by the full SOTF. So that would be great to have that too, because that data can then just be imported into, used in our annual report too, to understand how long is it taking on average to process all of these cases, how many times are they going before committees, how many committee hearings have they had versus how many SOTF hearings have they had. I think that's, because that's kind of what one of the things we're trying to do here is just make it more efficient. Like, does it really need to be, going in front of committee 5 times over a 200-day period? Or is there some way to kind of, just make the process more efficient so we can process it in the 45-day period specified in the Sunshine Ordinance?
Like the Cicero case.
Yeah.
How many times is that?
Yeah.
Been before committee?
Yeah, I mean, there were some cases that went like 5, 6 times.
Yeah.
All cases went at least twice because they went to a committee and then they went to the full task force. And then some had a huge spread in terms of the number of days between when it was brought as a complaint to when it finally got decided by the task force. Some were shorter, some were longer. But I thought it was important to know that, since we weren't really meeting the goals met by the ordinance, or set by the ordinance. So if that can be incorporated in the chart, then I wouldn't have to, or someone doing an annual report wouldn't have to reconstruct. It was kind of painstaking to reconstruct it. So.
Well, I can say, excuse me, from just doing the work and keeping the complaint chart that we have, that I think we're kind of winding down on this cloud we've had over us of having had the pandemic, and we couldn't meet for 6 months. And I really think that we're closing in on those numbers. And I say that because, as you look at the September agenda and the October agenda, those are cases that are newer. Well, some of them are, but we're really closing. 2018 is done. 2019 is pretty much done. We've closed out several of those cases because we're not hearing from petitioners.
Yeah.
And that's a problem too.
Yeah. I would just love to have an easy way to show how, like, numerically, how we're closing in on meeting the time requirements too.
What Pat suggested also that a graphic, that would have what the different colors of, will you explain it?
An infographic of some sort.
Using a graphic to explain what we've seen in the last 5 years. So, for example, taking the table that was provided in the most recent administrator's report and looking at data over 5 years, just looking at a comparison for each committee, how long or what has increased in the number of cases year over year, just as a discussion point to see what has changed, perhaps to be able to compare it to the change in the momentary pause of meetings being held. see if there is a seasonality that we can identify from the data, and then use that to inform us about possible projections about number of cases that would need to be heard, how many cases would need to be processed, understanding what the data can tell us. Not at that point yet?
Yeah, I think that would be great because, you know, one of the things I found when I did the annual report is we really only decided 45 cases last year. And, you know, if we were to get really on top of things, if we got rid of our backlog and we were just trying to process new things that came in year by year, you know, this year so far we've had like 55 cases or something like that. So already more than we processed last year. So if our aim is to get everything through in a really timely fashion, it is good to know, like, you know, where are these cases? What is the trend? What can we predict? Can we predict that we're still going to have more cases than we can resolve if we continue with our current process? And if so, what do we need to change about the process to fix that?
Yeah, I mean, in a way, like effectively, the members of this task force do not consider themselves to be under any deadlines. I think in effect, because, you know, we can look at a case that goes back to 2020, 2019, and we could say, well, that's too bad. You know, that's really, you know, like, God, that's all. But like nobody's got any parameter like to figure out, well, when's it too late? You know, and there could be a better system where like something, whether it's a real deadline or not, there were deadlines that were in the initial ordinance, but I think that they're not really we're not even really close to them. But I'm just kind of like saying what I've said before. Yeah, just about the speed of things. That's my grievance.
Well, I'm glad you guys are doing this. It seems like a really good idea.
She came up with the idea for the graph, which was great.
Yeah, the graph could be, and we could.
You can see in color what it really looks like.
It'd be one of those animated ones that like shifts like as the years go by.
Oh my goodness. I'm going to what? Heat maps and oh my goodness. Okay.
I'm kidding. I don't need an animated graph.
Okay. Well, does anyone else have anything you want to add, or should we call it on the item? And
should we ask for public comment?
Sure.
Yeah.
Here. Ms. Cabrera, is there anybody available for public comment?
There are currently no attendees.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Well, it makes for an easier discussion. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't worry about
We
boring
could have said
public.
anything we wanted to say, and there's nobody listening. Okay. So then we do announcements. Go ahead, Cheryl. Next item.
Item number 10, announcements, comments, questions, and future agenda items by members of the complaint committee.
Okay, I don't know if this is really an announcement, but when I went today to look at the website on how the complaint process works, because I wanted to look at that document, the link from our website to the complaint process document is a dead link. So I just want to mention that. I don't know if that's really an announcement, but I just feel like you need to know that. And we need to get that link live. And then I just had my comments about like not being able to highlight the PDFs, not being able to search for information through all parts of the PDF. And I hope that we can fix that in future packets.
Everybody ready to go to the next one?
Item number 11, adjournment,
Okay, move to adjourn.
9:29.
All in favor?
Aye. 9. Oh, man.